Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the studio. Welcome here, Martha and Jessica over there. Everyone say hi.
Hi, hi, hi. Glad you're
Yeah,
here.
they're all here just busy typing away. I guess you guys are all having fun on the chat. And since I don't have it up here on my computer screen right now, you guys are having all the fun.
We're
So
just
you-
talking about beverages and
beverages.
we've got
Yeah, I heard that
sparkling peach
Vivian has a bowl.
nectar,
They said
chai.
Vivian has a bowl of ice cream. Is that what that is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because everybody knows that food and painting go
Yeah.
hand in hand.
I want to see just 1 second, guys. I want to see what the delay is here on the stream. You guys picking it up there now?
Yes, I can hear you.
You can hear me fine?
Yes, I
Okay.
can hear you.
Yeah, because there's usually, it gets a little difficult sometimes. Some of you are here for the very first time, but when we do a live class like this and we broadcast this out, there's a delay. It's kind of like satellite delay that you watch on the news. There's a delay between what I do here and what they're seeing and stuff. What you're seeing here is like a 15-second delay on there. So sometimes it gets a little bit inconvenient and they get a little bit confused listening to what you're hearing and listening to what I'm saying and that delay. But they're professionals at it now, right, guys? Yeah, you guys can do all that, right? There's
Yeah,
no
We're
problem.
working this
No
out.
problem.
It's
Yeah.
going to be great.
Yeah, it'd be great. Okay, so what I want to do with this live class tonight, and we were talking today, we so enjoy these live classes, are spending our time together, giving you the chance to write some questions. They will feed the questions to me and I will answer them. And I want to do a little bit of painting for you. So for tonight, it'll be a couple hours long. So Vivian, you might need a couple bowls of ice cream. It'll be a couple hours long. I want to do a painting setup for you. And I want to show you just a few things. Some of you are asking, well, what's the color theory? What are you doing in the color theory class? So I'm going to show just a little bit of that. But I want to do a landscape setup and introduce you to a few of those specific techniques. We want to talk about developing your style, developing a system. And so I want to do that with you, and then I want to apply it to a landscape. Now, some of you are going to, want to paint along. What I suggest, highly suggest, is that you watch it with me tonight and listen to what I'm saying, ask the questions and everything. The live stream will be available immediately, back up on this link. You can watch it at any time again, but the chat isn't. The chat doesn't repeat, so you won't be able to see the chat and the questions. So pay attention to some of the questions and everything. Watch the live stream, and then you can go back and paint it tomorrow, paint it this weekend, and work and develop it. And then if you want me to critique those, critique what you paint, what you're going to do with this landscape, then you can always send a picture to me in on that contact form, and we'll be happy to give you some suggestions and everything. But we have to create this pathway, and that's what I want to do first off tonight. We want to do that, create this pathway so you know how to create your paintings. And then after we do most of that painting, I had some requests to talk about how do you market yourself as an artist? How do you sell some of your work? So after we do all the painting, those of you that aren't interested in that, you can shut off the feed. But if you're interested in that, I'm going to give you some hints, and I want to start a conversation about how to be a professional artist, how to sell your work, how can you start. Some of you want to start making money at doing this. I want to give you some insight and some help into doing that. So we'll do that following just a brief setup of the landscape. All right, sound good? Anybody in here?
Everybody's great. Marco said she has an echo,
She has an echo.
but Jessie doesn't. So I don't know who's feeling left out and who's getting twice for the price of one. Marco?
Yeah, it's not coming from
Hi.
Marco.
No, I got it. She had it open in 2 windows.
There we go.
Margo.
Boy, dual Dave and double stereo, double video. Okay. So everything's good. No, everything shows that it's streaming fine. Okay. So one of the things that a couple of things that I want to do with you guys, and I'm going to show you this, but I'm going to do just a little bit of some color. Talk to you just for a second about the color, because we have just started the online color. And some of you I know have studied color theory with me. I know a couple of you in here have studied color with me for like 15 years. We've done color and very in-depth color studies. What I'm going to do with this color class is completely different. I'm going to do what we call applied theory. So we're going to take the first 3 months or so of the class. It's going to be over a year long. We're going to take the first month or so. What's the matter?
Can you you turn up the volume? Oh,
Sure.
just a smidge for Karen?
Yeah, I can.
She says her speakers are at 100%.
Okay, I can blast her out here too. I can go way up here on that. We'll try that.
Thank you.
Try that. Be a bit louder. Okay, so I'm going to do what's called applied theory. So the first 3 months we're going to learn a language of color, so I can teach you with this, and then what we're going to be doing is a lot of paintings, applying that actual theory to those paintings. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be very different. We're going to look at some different artists painting landscapes, florals, everything, you name it. And this applied theory, some of the stuff and I'll show everybody a few things along the way, because it's so neat. We're going to talk a little bit about that applied theory tonight as we look at Clyde Aspervig, a landscape painter that I introduced some of you that went to Sydney. I gave you a brief introduction on him, and I want to show you some other things tonight on how he does stuff. So it's really exciting. I'm really excited to teach it because I've never taught it this way before. I've just done the cold, lectures of theory. Values have 3 shadows. Where do you put warms and cools? But what are they doing with that today? How does Clyde Aspervig use it, or Jason Rich use it? Some of the big name painters who are selling today, how are they using that theory? And that's what's called the applied theory. So I want to do some of that with you. But first I want to show you a couple of things that I put up into the classroom here this evening. And one of them is very, very important. I've never shared this before. I wrote it, you can see where I wrote it. I wrote it in 2015. And it's in the continuing education part of the classroom. So you hit the continuing education page, scroll almost all the way to the bottom, and you'll see the PDFs for the Art of Painting series here of what I wrote. This is a 4-page in-depth statement of how I paint my overall techniques, and what I do in each individual thing. Now, artists create these. So when you get done with here's the Art of Painting, Direct Painting Technique, Suggested Steps. This is a 19-step process to create any type of painting, from reestablishing an 11th step here. You're going to reestablish a path of light, it's an entire thing. Here are the original statements of what I do with brushes, what I do with this. I wrote this all up with the intention 4 years ago of pushing artists into doing a lot more teaching and doing a lot more finding their own way, their own kind of course of action. And it's really kind of exciting, but I didn't release it because I felt that it might be a bit too much, for some of you, because we do have a lot of painters that paint for their own pleasure, and that's great, and that's awesome. But this is goes the next step beyond into into creating a system, basically your own type of system. What's she doing?
I don't know. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So this you will find, this you will find inside. The dogs are making noises
Yeah.
outside, and Mom just ran out whistling like crazy out there. So, anyway, so this you will find in continuing education page. I also put this in, which is something that we're just beginning to talk about. This is a color reference information for the Heritage Multimedia colors. And what it does is it tells each one of our colors the actual pigment number that we're using, its value, its intensity, its opacity, and whether it's warm and cool, or it's a color neutral and stuff like that. This is something that I will be talking more about into the future as well, in all of the classes. So you'll find both of these there. This might be enjoyable reading for you. I'm going to be starting to present some of this in some of the classes, and even in the S102 landscape class, we have some paintings that we're going to do. We have a finishing up contemporary style landscape that I do want to paint this year with everyone in that class, finding your own style and stuff. So there's some other things you want to do, but you want to maybe download these. I wanted to show you that. Download those and take a look at them. It's a lot of information. Yeah, Jay.
Just to mention that Judy's already read them, and she says they're very well written.
Yeah, I did.
Judy's on it.
Judy's on it. Yeah, yeah. And what I did is I got together with it when writing this is I brought in some of my friends here at the studio, and we spent a week going over what I felt was the proper way with acrylics to establish a look and a progress in a step type process. And that would make it a little bit more teachable and a little bit more understandable. And and we refined it, we practiced it, got it all ready and stuff. And I never released it. I didn't release it because I thought it would, because everyone started heading out a little bit more simple, in everything that we do. And, today I'm finding a group of you that really want to know. And it's great. You're writing me and asking me questions and doing this stuff. And, that's exciting for us here at our studio when we have students that really want to know. We want to share some of the behind the scenes, some of the things that we do, and that makes you a better artist. That's where we want to go. So there's a group of you that really want to know that. And obviously Judy does. She read it right away already. and this is going to be fun. It's going to be fun. But anyway, one of the things I want to show you too is, and I just did this in the, and I told Jessica I want to do this again because it's a fantastic thing, because I spend a lot of my time, I'd say at least twice a week I get a question like this. Why David, do you use, focus up there. Why do you use acrylics and not the oils? And I always tell them is that, I do a lot of acrylic techniques because A, I have a health problem with oils because I did use oils for a long time. And B, I love acrylics. I love the speed and everything that I can do with acrylics. But these are different types of oils that I've had, and I have oil paints from everything. I buy oil paints. I hardly ever use them for anything. I use them for testing. Like this is Sandon's. Those of you that, I've introduced Sandon to you all the time. This is his Pro Mix system, and I've had it for a few years. You can see how much I've actually used it, but I use it, test his color, test his mist. He's got a fantastic system, and I can create that system with acrylic and stuff. But one of the things that I showed in the color class the other day was, one of what I think is the worst kind of color that's out there today is sap green. And this is an oil color by Winsor Newton. This particular one here is sap green. And then this is another one by Winsor Newton. There are Galleria ones here, and this particular color is sap green. That's really the same color, the same company. I'll pull these down in just a second. Here's Liquitex heavy bodied acrylic. So these two are oil. This is Liquitex heavy bodied acrylic, sap green, and this is Martin F. Weber's oil, sap green. Here.
Dave, you're right at the top of the screen, so you're. Do you mind bringing your palette down just a smidge?
Yeah, I'm going to pull it down in just a second.
Okay.
Yeah, just give me
want
1
to see
second.
everything you're doing.
So, yeah. So this is the Winton, the Winsor Newton sap green. Okay. This is also Winsor Newton sap green in their Galleria line. So you can see it's a lighter color here. So you can see that it's a lighter color. Okay. I'll come. Matter of fact, I can zoom that in, Martha, so you guys can see that a little bit better. And I was talking about this the other day in the color class, one of the lectures, and also those in color. I put another lecture up today. This is right here is Liquitex, and then here is the Martin F. Weber sap green. So all this is, we've known as colorists for the longest time that sap green, the color name sap green, is the most abused color in the industry because everyone makes it completely different. And what you do as an artist, for those of you who have never seen before, this is what we do. We use what's called the chemical index name, and that's our language. Here, I'll zoom in on this a little bit. Hopefully it'll pick up on it. It's really small, but underneath here, you have what that actual color is, and this one says PY 110 and phthalocyanine blue PB15. So that's what's actually in the color right there. And it's really hard to read. It's really, they're small print. Sorry about that. But so that's this color that's right here. Excuse me, this one right here. And then we have this particular sap green right here. And when you go to blow up this sap green right here, you see that it's PY3, which is an arulite yellow. It's phthalo green blue, and it's black. So they're making it completely different. So it's made with a carbon black, it's made with a phthalo green, and it's made with an arulite yellow. So it's a totally different type of green. This heavy-bodied liquid text that's right here, you look at it here onto the back here, and it'll tell you right up here, it tells you it's phthalocyanine blue. It is PY139, which is Indian yellow. Phthalocyanine blue 15:3, which is phthalo blue, and it contains a iron oxide black, which is PBK11. So it makes PBK11. So it's phthalo blue, Indian yellow, and a black, a warm black. So that's how that one is made. Completely different from the other ones that are made. And then this last one that's here made is the Martin F. Weber, and it's easier to read. They're a little bigger, but it's PY83, and then it's PG7. This little number out here is a chemical index number. You don't really need to know that, but they put it on there, which is fine. That's PG7, phthalo blue, green blue, and PO43, which is Paranone orange. And so if I, as an artist, let's say I'm studying an artist, and they sit there and they say, okay, I'm going to use Martin F. Weber's sap green, which is this one right here. And you want to translate that over to the heritage line. These are the colors you need to use right here. You need to use, if you want to make that color, you look at the back of it, it's right here. It says it is PY, which is PY83, which is our PY83. Then they use the PG7, which is the phthalo green blue, which is our PG7 right here. They use the Paranone orange, PO43, which is PO43. And it's a very strong yellow with a color with an undertone. So I imagine when I look at it, I go, well, they're going to use a lot of the Darulite yellow in this mix just because it's a powerful undertone of yellow into that color. So I probably put out a lot of the Paranone, the Darulite yellow into that, and you mix that up and you get that color. Now it's got a slight toning or grain of it here, which is going to come from the complement here. It has, I put in just a touch too much of the Darulite there. So we'll put in just a little bit more. But this is how you narrow it down. And it'll have just the tiniest amount of that's probably way too much, because it needs it to gray. And Paranone is a very powerful grain. It's very, very expensive color. So they won't use that very much. But that's going to get you a lot closer there, and the grayness and stuff to that color. It's going to be right in there, and you're going to make that, and you're going to look for the undertone of it's just a little yellow, so it needs just the tiniest bit, and you can see it's just the tiniest bit back into this. But you can make with these pigments, the whole bottom line is here is you can make those particular colors here and get that color, get that same type of color. And so because we use the same pigments, we talk the same language. It doesn't make a difference of your base, whether your base is, a linseed oil, or your base is an acrylic base here like this, or with our multimedia, slightly different base. We use the same types of pigments. So, Heritage can make any one of these sap greens very easily just by knowing what's inside that particular color. And that's that's all theory. That's all color theory. We learn how to make particular colors. So if I'm studying another artist and some other artist says, well, I use Winsor Newton, and it lists the number of colors, and I go over and look at the chemical index names for all those colors, and I can make it all with Heritage really easy. What we try to do as an artist and as a paint company is you try to pick out colors that are going to be effective, that you can cover the range of the color wheel and stuff, pretty effectively. So it's an easy thing to do. And so when we develop, what we do with acrylics or whatever you're going to do, it's the chemical index name that tells you what that is. The name sap green means nothing. What's a French blue? It means nothing. I mean, I know how to classically make French blue. It's phthalo blue black and a little red 101, which is your English red oxide. That's how it's classically made. But we talk numbers, and those numbers are going to be very, very important. I look at those numbers when I go pick my colors. And I talk about that into the class and stuff. So we have right here the pigment color wheel. There's for those of you that don't, have never seen me use something like this. I'm using it in the color theory class, but there's also, I did a pigment value that's on the continuing education page. I show you basically how to read a pigment wheel. And with this particular pigment wheel, Martha said, "Oh, Dave, why don't you tonight do the one where you make that color?" And I said, "Okay, I'll show them that."
It's my favorite mix.
It's your favorite.
It's like magic.
Your favorite thing. It's like magic. And so I started doing this a few years ago because it is magic, because you can never guess. And I always say, as an artist, it's like if I take a dioxazine purple, which is a PV23, and my phthalo green blue, which is a PG7, and I mix the purple and green together, what color will you get?
I can't wait to find out.
I can't wait. Yeah. So what you have to do is you have to know on the, we use a blue spectrum PV23, which is going to be right out about here. So PV23 would be right about here. And the PG7 is going to sit right about here, PG7. And so what you do is all you have to do is just draw a line. Draw a line right back through those colors, right down to there, and you'll make this spectrum of colors, which is what a lot of people say you can never do. You can never make a primary blue. You can, and it will. It should make a blue. About halfway into here should make a blue. But bright colors are out here, toned colors are in here. So it's not going to be a super bright blue. It's not going to be very bright. It's just going to be a toned blue. So if I put this out, and I've done this so many times, I know how much to put out of each, but to get some different blues here. Martha's smiling. She knows that she likes this coming.
I just love magic.
This is magic. Yeah,
color
so,
magic.
That's the whole thing. So if you sit there and you say, okay, I'm going to take, it's hard to imagine. I'm going to take this color, and I'm going to take this color, and I'm going to mix them together. What is it that I'm going to get? What are you looking for, Dave?
Huh? Oh, I was trying to remember the name of Ralph Mayer.
Oh, Ralph Mayer's book, The Artist Handbook. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
And so you mix this all together here, like this, and what do you get? You're going to get a blue. And if I add out here somewhere, oh, Jay, can I have, because I used up all my, I have just a tiny bit. I'm going to need I'm going to need a new white sometime here, because I used up all my white in the painting here.
Me too.
So let me just pull this out a bit. But if I add a little bit of white to this, you'll see this here. And so you'll see that it is a blue. You're going to make a blue, and of course we'll add a little bit more white. It's a beautiful blue. It's a beautiful blue, and you can make it lighter and stuff, but you can't make it brighter. You can make it lighter. You can make it more toned, but you can't make it brighter with that. Thank you, Jay. And so I can make this lighter over here like this, and you see you get a lighter blue. And it's a beautiful blue. It's a beautiful painting blue. And I was showing this, and I did the most, I was telling Jessica, she came in, I said, I did the most awesome horse the other day. Filmed it. I thought, I'm going to film my practice. It was a practice one like the one I put on the page for you guys that showed you another horse, but I did another one. And I used Diox purple into the painting of this, what's called a gorilla horse. it's the type of coloring it is, and used that into the blue sky and did all this wonderful stuff, and it was coming out absolutely amazing. And I was an hour into it, almost done, and I had accidentally shut off the down painting camera. So I had filmed I had painted the whole thing, and I wasn't filming it. That did that. So I have to do it all again for you guys, but I'll be doing that. But it was a great way to add Diox purple, and I one of the things that I'm going to consider adding into my landscape palettes is that Diox purple, especially since I've read a couple of other artists that are using some of those colors and the versatility of it. But I need to do a little bit more painting of it and learning it and so on and so forth. But that's what you do as an artist, is you study the theory of that color, how it works, how it can be applied, and then we're going to be doing that all this year, and I'm going to be doing it in all the classes, really a little bit more than I have done. And I want to apply these colors in some different ways. So it'll be a lot of fun. I'm hoping it'll be a lot of fun for you to see some of this stuff, okay? So that's what the theory part of it is. We're going to develop this language. We're going to talk about value. One of the things that I had, and I had it here, I showed it in the classes, creating rules or things for painting a landscape and painting values and stuff. We'll look at that in just a minute here with this. But artists create these theories of it, and I love to study these theories. And it doesn't mean that one theory is correct. They all created theories, and over the years, over the almost 40 years now that I have been studying color, teaching color, I have read so many theories, and I came up with this little thing that, whenever somebody would create a new little theory, they'd write a book and then totally confuse the industry. There's so many theories that can get you confused. Some of them are correct in certain circumstances and not correct in others. So there's a lot of theories out there, but I study them all and practice them all, learn them all. And some of them are very, very exciting, and I want to present some of that stuff to you. But make sure you go over to the continuing education page, download some of that information, and because from now on in some of the classes I'm going to be talking about that, especially as some of you have asked that. Yeah, Jay, did you want some?
No, I would just like that back if you're all finished with it.
Yeah, I had everything all set out here and then totally lost it, and so I had to borrow Jay's. Huh? No, that's okay. They can have that.
Thank you.
So yeah, so what I want to do now is we're going to go right into painting a landscape. And what I'm going to do, what our plan is, like out in Sydney this year, where some of you have already said you're going to be coming there. We're going to have a great time. I'm going to ask you to bring photos of things that you want to paint, from florals to landscapes to still lifes. And we're going to put all this, and I'm going to show you how to do what we call applied theory, mapping out a painting. In other words, create the painting. One of the things that got me here the other day, I was out on Facebook, and sometimes I read the feed, sometimes I don't have time to read the feed, but I was reading the feed, and one of my friends out there said, she said, I was out on this art group, and this, she goes, I don't understand all these artists that talk about you need to study this and make a plan. I just sit down and I just paint, and I paint what I feel, and it comes out, and that's just the way I do it. I can't do it that way. And I know a lot of my students can't do it that way. I am a solid, left brain, logical, analytical chemist. But I can paint. And I can paint because I apply a theory, or I'm applying a technique. But the biggest thing I do is I make a plan before I paint anything. There are sometimes I'll say to you in the videos, well, I'm going to try this, or I was talking with this Jessica. Oh, I sit down, I'm going to have some fun. I'm going to toss some paint on to loosen up something. But then I'm going to go right into the painting. And that painting, I start following my theories and everything that I use. I follow theories. And it's like the other day, some of you saw this that I did, this rabbit that I did. and it was a practice. And I don't always, I don't always film and show and do stuff. And I didn't. Let me step back this camera here for a minute. This was a rabbit I painted here. And it was just a little over an hour painting for me. And what I did was I used 2 brushes, and I used a limited set of colors, and I was applying a theory to painting rabbit fur, because I want to paint more wildlife, different types of animals. And some of you gave me some great idea, fox and everything like that. I've never painted a rabbit like this before in my life. This is my first time. All it is a theory. All I applied was a theory, a brush movement theory, a color theory, a technique. Now, as you look at the rabbit here, there are warms and cools, the placement of it. I pick out a light, but real big things that I want to talk to you about too in all the classes it's the texture. See the texture? And you look up close at this and you go, wow, Dave, did you ever learn to paint? Okay, but you get back, it's an optical painting. I wanted to paint an optical painting. Can you see all that texture in there? There's tons of texture on it. These are texture strokes, and this took me 4 times going over that to get that much texture into that painting. And you look up close at it, and it doesn't look all that great. You go, oh my God. And there's no blending in it whatsoever. No blending in it whatsoever. I painted it pure acrylic. But as you step back here, it optically bends. And as you get back, and this rabbit becomes amazing at about 6 feet, is really where it becomes amazing. And when I first painted this rabbit, I sent it out to a couple of friends, and one of them that she got back to me absolutely immediately was Deanne. She said, oh my goodness, how did you do that? That's just one blue stroke into the background back there and leave that. That's one thing I was trying to do, was be able to quickly put something like that on and leave it. I've never been able to really do that. But it was part of the theory that that the land or the wildlife painters use. This is part of the things that they do. And one of the things I want to show you here tonight. But yeah.
Everybody loves the rabbit.
Oh, good.
All kinds of rave reviews about the rabbit.
Most of my rabbits are folk art and have cute little eyes and shines and everything. So,
can you talk a little bit about the blues, or which blues that you used, or your warm, cool?
See, that's all part of the. It's a great question. That's all part of the planning. It depends on where you're going to go with your blues. I mean, and I showed that in a color theory. It's like, okay, if I'm going to paint a lot of grays, one of the beautiful set of grays that you can make from your blues is phthalo blue and naphthol red light. They don't make violet. They make the beautiful set of grays, and that's some of the grays that I use into the rabbit. And so the rabbit has a lot of these beautiful grays in it, okay? Purpley grays. And so I didn't make a purple and then gray it. What I did was I picked a blue and a red that when I find them on the wheel, okay, when I look at my PR9 and my PB 15:3 here, and you draw a line between those two, it goes right to the violet side of gray. It's almost into the center of the wheel. These make perfect, beautiful painting grays. It's what I use to make quickly paint mountains and all kinds of stuff. So the blue, I don't want to use I don't want to come over here and say grab PR170, which is naphthol red, and ultramarine blue, because it will make a better violet. I want grays that are going to go right through just this side of black and white, just violet to that. And that's the grays that I create throughout. That's these creating all through here, warms and cools, increasing the blue, cools it. This is increasing the blue, increasing the red, warms it, and creates them all through here. And of course, I'll add some yellows and a few other little secret sauces and things that we do as artists that we never share. No, I don't do that. But it makes some wonderful thing. And so that's what creates. Now I have my red violet, one of the colors I did add to this also was my PV19. So I could create PV19 and phthalo blue makes a violet right out here that is beyond halfway. It's out here towards the slightly more violet. And so I added that to be able to do this, because naphthol red light and this violet color you see here, naphthol red light and phthalo blue can't do. It can't make that color. It's impossible to make that color. They make the grays. And so this right here is phthalo blue, a little white, and a little bit of the naphthol red light to tone it slightly, and taking a brush here, saying a quick prayer and going boom, like that, and hoping it gets done. What was interesting to me is, you know, Martha immediately loved it. She goes, I love the what was it you said, the icy like lake that you put back there. And Jessica came in and said, I love the snowbank that you put right in there with that. And so the whole theory behind everything in the wildlife and everything is, don't paint so much. The viewer will see what it is that they want to see. But we go in and we make things so perfect right away. So we feel we have to take away, I mean, we have to paint it perfect, that we take away the viewer's imagination. And this is one thing that why the Impressionists are so great. I understand it completely now. It's so great. If you do painting correctly, Martha's going to see a lake, Jessica's going to see a snowbank, and I painted nothing there. I painted color. All I painted was color. And I'm starting to learn that and see that in other things, and I want to show you that. And this year is going to be an opening up for us to see all these different things, to see what it is that we're going to see. How are we going to see this stuff? Yeah.
Okay, we have two comments that are kind of related. Just a second, Jessica. I know what you're going to Yvonne's question.
Yes, Yvonne's question.
Okay, but David, when you talked about when you're talking about you had a plan, I remember the discussion of this about how big what we had talked quite a bit about what size painting you were going to do. Yes, exactly.
I talked about all of it,
and
yeah.
that you had talked about the effect that you wanted to create. You weren't quite sure how you were going to get it, but when you talk about some people sit down and just start throwing paint around, but other people like yourself say, okay, I want to start to paint a hair.
That's a very good point. That's a very, very good point.
Yeah, I want to paint a hair, and I want this, but I want it to be this size.
Right.
And then that, and you want it that size because Yvonne's question comes into play.
Yvonne's question is, how do you decide how far away you need to be from a picture to best view it? So more textures if you're further away?
And see, that's the big, that's all in the planting. Well, let me tell you, I don't know if Tamae is on tonight, but I've been in Tamae's house in Hiroshima, Japan, and she can't paint any more than 4 feet. I mean, her dining room table into her living room wall is about 4 feet. So you don't want to paint something that needs to be viewed at 15 feet in a smaller house like that. So you're painting it for maybe 3 feet, 4 feet viewing. This one I painted for 6 feet. I painted it for deciding at 6 feet. And Martha brought up, a very good point, because I sat down and I said, okay, I'm going to do a 14, it's an 18 by 14 painting here. And I showed her 3 different sizes of rabbits, and we setbacks. I said, I want to paint it for about 6 feet. And we stood back about 6 feet and looked at which one of those 3 we thought, and we both came up with the center one, this size of the rabbit, because it allowed you to see a certain amount of detail, but not too much and everything. And that helped us pick out the look. And then from there, that's the size of photo I used as the reference. And then I started to apply the theory. And part of the theory of the wildlife theory that landscape painters use too is we're going to use optical strokes right up. And so I really defined my center of interest, which was the eye. And I mean, I've done something terribly horrible, which I used to always judge people against all the time in when they did certification and stuff, is I isolated a color right on that rabbit's eye. That's the only place of orange in this entire painting here. But it works as far as the theory, because that orange is in a few other little places in here, other colors. But see this optical, this is what I want you to really see. See this optical stroke of texture that's right here. That was, I planned that for about 10 minutes, looking at that and thinking about how am I going to do that stroke? What brush am I going to use to, to capture that particular stroke? And I ended up using a brush just like this, loaded it up with a gob of paint, and I set it down like this, and this is how I made that stroke. I pulled this right, well, the texture's going to grab it there. I pulled it right down like that, and I lifted it off and granulated off right there, and that is the shoulder stroke right there on that rabbit. And then from this point on into all these areas here, I set the texture, and then I slowly diminish the texture down to nothing, coming back down to here. And then here is another big stroke, which is the back leg, the top of the back leg here on this side. So I've got to apply, I don't want this to come forward here. See, I want your eye up here by this one here. See how much, even though it's smaller, how much more power this stroke has here in this painting than this one does. And how did I do this one right here? I took the 3/4 inch brush and I made this particular stroke just down one time, like that. And then I put some of the blue from the background right here, turned it on its side like this, and made one stroke. And that's it. I planned those particular strokes. And why did I use the 3/4 inch and thin paint? There's no texture. See the difference there? There is no texture in that stroke, whereas the other one has texture in it. Do you see that? And that texture helps me set what's called the optics of my painting. What is going to come forward and what is going to recede, where that center of interest is going to be. So now you see, even though this is a smaller brush, that stroke, because of the texture, has a lot of power to it. This has a light area, but it has no power because the color is thinner and less texture. Does that make sense? So when I set the optics in here, I know I'm going to paint a lot of light-dark contrast, warm-cool contrast, a lot of textures. I'll set and put a lot of textures, and then from here, it's just model color getting thinner and thinner and thinner. Edges get away, get thin, thin, thin. And back here and Deanne has known how long I have struggled to be able to do this with a big brush and leave it. I watch wildlife painters and Western painters do that all the time and get this fantastic look, but that takes a lot of courage, and that takes a lot of courage to be able to just say, okay, I'm going to do this and leave it alone, because we always want to go back and play, or maybe that's a little too much and soften it out and stuff, and they don't do it. They don't do it because they have their color exactly correct. They plan that color, we plan it out, we plan that stroke. I read something here this winter, a couple of things. First off, those of you that were in Sydney, and I introduced you to Ken Knight and how much I was going to study Ken Knight. And right after you guys left Sydney, and a few days later, my family got me all of his DVDs, which were, exceedingly expensive. Got me all his DVDs, which are only 3 because he never teaches. He never shows. And he really isn't a teacher. He'll paint along there, and he has a guy there asking him questions so he can teach. But I watched, no kidding, I watched those videos at least 30 hours on each video. I put them in the background, I paint trays, I do everything. And I was just listening to his thought, or listening to the scraping of the sound that he's doing on that, and trying to capture that free movement on it. Because it's like another artist that I read that I studied, Bill Anton, that I introduced you to. Bill Anton said, Bill Anton's paintings sell for 65, a 30-inch painting, Western, sells for $65,000 today to the collectors. And I want to know why. And he said something very, very important in one interview that he did, because he doesn't teach, he doesn't write, he's just a paint, but he does some things. He said something that was very important. He says his ultimate goal is to capture the color, movement, and characteristic of a cloud in a single brush stroke. And that's where he is going. So what does that mean? He's trying to simplify, and he plans everything that he does and sits about and thinks about that stroke and then makes that strike of that color for that thing. And you try to get the colors, the tone, the placement, the movement, the textures, everything correct, and then you don't touch it again because it will destroy the power of that particular element. And so this blue stroke, which I would always touch up, and I want you to right now, because I'm going to show you some of this as we do the landscape. Right now, I want you to look at this granulation that's right in here. Do you see that right back in here? I guess I got to show you. I got to turn the camera over there. You guys can see it. Sorry about that.
And say Roberta was just asking about that blue
yes,
stroke.
Exactly. Dave, show us.
That blue
Dave,
stroke
show us. Yeah,
so
sorry about that. I forget to switch over. You guys got to see it. But see the granulation, what is called the granulation of the stroke that's right here. Okay. I have played, and that's one reason why I went back to the acrylics from the globals for a lot of stuff, so I can get this stiffer, drier color, and I can do that a lot better with this. I want, when we start looking at some of these other artists, the big expensive paintings, the ones that are going to go for $100,000 and stuff, what the collectors are looking for, what they're doing. These artists are doing this, and I want you to remember that, because so many of us would fix that. But I want you to remember that granulation becomes extremely important as part of a technique in it. And that granulation adds the sparkle interest back there without taking away too much from the rabbit, because the rabbit contains a lot of warm and cools. And the other thing the rabbit contains is a tremendous amount of texture. If you could feel this, you got texture out like crazy. I put out, like I did this for myself. Right before I painted the rabbit, I did this where I showed Jessica. I did this over the weekend as part of my studies. I was putting out my reds and my violets and putting them out on a shade of glass so I can look at the color through what a transparent layer would look for. And I was adding texture medium in there I'm looking at the lofting of the paint, the ability, how much texture, the bump texture I get in that particular paint, what the PR9, which is the naphtha red light, and this is PV19, which is red violet, what they look like with and without the texture medium, as far as getting what we call the peaks. See the little peaks into the texture. Do I need to use texture medium to get more peaks in certain looks that I want to have? Or can I do it with straight paint? These are things that I'm playing with and learning it, with the acrylics, and I find I do it really well if I do it pure acrylic and not global. I can get it. There's a textured stroke right there. See how that ear part comes in right there? It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of planning on this one, and what you really see when you look here now, and you step back, and especially when you get like 6 feet, you don't see those textured strokes, but they stand out, bringing it right here. And I made a couple mistakes on this rabbit that I know when I paint the other one, and I'm going to paint it and film it, that I want to change. Like I got the curvature of his back just a little bit wrong, but
Can you do a more distant shot so we can get a more of an overall?
Sure.
Just so we can do our own optical blending.
Yeah, we step way back here. Let me just step way back, and you can see it way back. I can take you all the way to the other side of the room.
I don't know. Good. Isn't somebody watching from Australia? That's pretty far back.
That's pretty far back. Yeah. Now you'll see Kipper right here. There's Kipper. Come here, baby, right here. Yeah, there's Kipper. You'll see Kipper right here too. She's my next subject. That's my next subject that I'm working on. I posted a picture of her on my Facebook page, and I'm working on that. But when you look back here, you don't see any of that texture. Mm-hmm. And you don't see any of the texture, and that rabbit jumps off, and that blue stroke fades away into a lot of the elements there. And people are going to say, oh, that's a streak of light coming through some trees or something like that. Mm-hmm. Everyone's going to see it a little different.
Do you have Roberta's question?
Yeah.
I guess Roberta says to better understand, if the granulated stroke, meaning that blue stripe, was not there, what would the painting be missing?
It would be missing, it would be a whole elemental area back here of nothing, which would cause your eye to focus in here. What does this line do? It takes you, and the rabbit brings you back.
I see.
That was my goal. I looked at it and I wanted to move the viewer with some element. I tried it here with the white first and ended up, and I took a step photo of it. I should show you. But I was like, okay, I'm going to bring the rabbit right out against white. And I took a white stroke and went out here first, like that. You can almost see it underneath where that was. And I went, that's too much. So I softened it back with some violet. And I said, but I need to move the viewer this way in the painting, some way away from the rabbit, but with nothing that's going to distract from the rabbit. And so I thought, well, you know what? I've seen Bill Anton do it 1,000 times in a Western with the blue and go like that and leave it and walk away. I can do that. And so I tried it and it worked. And it worked because I knew in my plan I wanted this to granulate. So I mixed it up into my, I planned the mix. I planned everything for it. I touched it down here. I knew I had to get that to granulate. I have to lift the pressure. I started hard and lift the pressure of the brush out like that and walked away and didn't touch it anymore and let it dry. Because I know it's paint. I can cover it up and fix it if I don't. And then I step back 6 feet and look at its movement. What is that movement that I want to have right in through here, into my painting, right in through here? To hold that viewer's eye right down in through there like that and move them through the painting. All the great painters, all of them, from Anton, Jason Rich, Clyde Aspervig, Knight, Robert Hagen, all these guys that I've been, and ladies that I presented to you for the last few years in some of these studies, all say that your paintings need to have a visual journey. And that's what's missing in so many paintings. And I've been presenting this in the flower class and everything. This visual journey is your path of light. And it can be a path of movement. It can be a path of texture or anything. But you've got to move the viewer through the painting. We've got to paint a rabbit, put him in there, move the viewer. How are you going to move the viewer? You're going to do it with light and dark. You're going to do it with warm and cool. You're going to do it with texture strokes or not texture strokes. You're going to do it with contrast of hue, contrast of saturation. There's just so many different ways that you can do it. And that's what artists do, is they do that. Yeah.
Great, absolutely great. Roberta sees the movement.
Yeah.
You're talking about the violets that they see more at a distance, and you do it closely, like that. The way it shifts when you move
it changes.
Away.
There was into this painting. I looked at this painting, at this photo. I had this photo of this this hare. It's not a rabbit. It's a hare. It's different. Okay, snowshoe hare. And I had all kinds of pictures of them. They're all over Nebraska too, these snowshoe hares. And I studied these and looked at these and said, okay, how? And I looked at this, and this is how I do it. I'll study this thing and look at it for a couple days and make myself a plan. I never painted a rabbit before like this, ever. But I applied the theory. And that's what I'm trying to teach you guys, is the theory. We can do anything if we get confident enough with the theory and we try it, and then we stop playing. That's our biggest nemesis of everything, is we play. We all play too much. Now, why do you play? You play because you don't know what to do next. And that's one reason why Jessica took hers back, but I wrote that 19-step progression of how to capture the art of painting. I took all of these artists, everything that they say, from the portrait painters to the wildlife painters to the landscape painters. I applied it to acrylics and created a 19-step process, step-by-step process for how to create a painting. And when I am ever lost about doing something, I go back to that process and I look at that process and I follow that particular process. Restate your darks. If you haven't restated your darks for a little bit, restate your darks. And that's a very important thing. And so one of the things that I'll be showing here this upcoming year is we're going to apply a brand new type of technique that I've really learned a lot with as I've studied Ken Knight and some of these others. And I've stated in the last couple of videos that I have done, and that is dark takes out light. And I've stated in the last landscape I stated it into, into the color theory landscape I did. I gave away a free video with the landscape the other day. I put it on there. Listen for that when I say that. I overpaint my lights and take them back out with my darks. I use my darks to control the lights because dark takes out light. And that, when I started doing that a few months ago, it totally changed everything that I paint and how I perceive the painting of wildlife and the painting of landscapes and so on and so forth. And so that's some of the stuff that I want to show you as to why. But I don't have to practice and practice and practice rabbits or hares to be able to paint that hare. I just have to have a plan, the technique, and see if that technique can create the look of hair on the hare. That's what I was practicing. Because now the next thing is I'm going to paint Kipper. And I've been looking at the painting of Kipper for a few days, and I'm starting to tackle it now with how I'm going to break up the brush strokes, the planes, the light planes, shadow planes, what types of brush textures, edges, and stuff that I'll be painting for. That's what I like to do. Okay, that's where we're going to go with some of this stuff that I want to show you guys. Okay, yeah, Mark.
When you use the term granulating, Yvonne's asking, is that the same as dry brushing when you're doing
very, very similar, but dry brushing, okay, the difference there, it's a great question. It's dry brushing is where we actually, and the people say, oh, you don't use, I've seen people load up for dry brushing and they work their brush till it has hardly any paint. No, it's the brush is not dry. It's the paint is drier. So you don't add a lot of water to the paint. You can use a ton of paint and dry brush. Okay. It's a granulated stroke, but you get this they paint dry brush. Now, dry brushing is where the entire field, the entire color stroke, or that strike of color is granulated. When I'm taking the granulated stroke here on this one, I go from power color to sparkle color, really is what I call it is. So I'm letting the color diminish out. When I start to let the color diminish out, what is happening is the background is starting to overtake the color. And so what you're trying to do is let it fade into the background.
I think Karen's been asking some good questions about creating for people for other living rooms.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so and I know it goes into the question, maybe the next topic we have about painting for others, and painting to sell. When you think about painting for yourself, one of your own paintings to sell, do you have a distance in mind for the optical?
It's where I'm going to hang it. Okay.
So if you're painting it for somebody else, you have like a rule of.
Well, if I'm painting it for myself, it's like I told you, I'm painting this one for my office in Sydney. One of the things is I painted the big elk, mm-hmm. which are sitting over there. I painted the big elk, and I said, I've got to take, because I want to hang that out in Sydney, I've got to take it back out to Sydney before I finish it, because we don't have a room here that's 40 feet across like the room that I'm going to hang it in Sydney.
To see the impact.
I want to see the impact at 40 feet of that big thing, where it is, and that's gonna. And I put a photo of it, and I said I need to take it back out to Sydney, put on the textured strokes, and I'll judge it. I'm going to paint it for about 15 to 20 feet because that's when people come down the stairs and they look at it and they open up into the room. I want it to grab them and make them walk forward. And then as they get further forward, they go, oh my gosh, he doesn't know how to paint. Because they see so much of that. It's optical. It's optical.
What do you think? Let's say we're selling the hare for sale. What would you encourage the impact distance to be for the
6 feet.
6 feet.
Now, you take somebody like Robert Hagen or something like that, he's going to disagree. He's going to say 10 to 12 feet. Mm-hmm. He paints all of his paintings for 10 to 12 feet, many times 15 feet. But I paint for 6 feet. This is a smaller painting. So they're going to be able to, the viewer's going to be able to capture this in 6 feet. They're going to be able to capture everything about it, the frame, everything about it. It'll fit in a normal size room, pretty nice and all that kind of stuff. If I go bigger, I step the painting further back. I step the image further back. Okay, so I stepped a look further back from that.
And as a little side note,
Yeah.
we were also talking about how some of us are seeing one color more than the other.
Exactly.
And we've had that conversation before about how colors that we like, we tend to see more of.
Exactly.
You being the blue and beige man.
Yes, exactly.
And I am all about
But
pop
that-
and purple.
That may make you see a lake and Jessica see a snowbank. And, you know, by what colors you're liking and you're picking out. And, you know, that gets down to, you know, everything that, and Jessica's going to do some lectures on Itten in the color theory class. And Johannes Itten, and Itten's theories about color balance, and his 8 rules of contrast that he uses to move a person through a painting. You know, that's all going to apply here. So, you know, it's a plan. It's developing a plan. And this is where I want to go with some of us this year, developing a plan. And then I want to I want to go out to Sydney and I want to sit all down together and say, okay, let's look at this picture. Let's paint it. Let's look and let's paint it. Let's break it apart and paint it. And I'm going to do a little bit of that, just a real simplified, very, very simplified version of that with you tonight on a small landscape.
I'm sorry, but Roberta sees an ice pond.
Ice pond with a little fish. And it could be. You know what? If you want to buy it, it can be whatever you want it to be. Okay.
As a DS says, the contrast of temperature and value makes a difference in this technique.
It does.
Absolutely.
It does, absolutely. And so, you know, and it's one of the things that I do, and I was painting these birds, and it changed the way I painted my birds here the other day with it, and why I'm going to film another one for the S101 bird painting class. I'm going to film another one of dark taking out light. And I used that theory several times. I used it all over this rabbit. Let me zoom this camera in, this downshot camera here, in a little bit more. But I used this whole theory, you know, like into here. What the nose is one of the easiest things to paint. I painted all the movement of the white, and then I just went blip with the dark and set the nose in. And your eye will paint the rest of it. But it's like here, this little tiny dark stroke becomes very important right here. I took out the light hair right there and put that little tiny dark stroke in. So most of this ear is painted dark. A lot of the techniques and stuff in there is painted dark, and then I'll set and break up some of the dark little touches. The theory in here is really kind of easy. You know, you control the lights. If I wanted to break this up, like I go smash that down, and then I look at the impact of that amount of texture there. And if I want it to break up, then I'll use dark and just break it up. Use dark and break it up, rather than coming in here and putting white, stroke, 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 stroke. I used to do that. So if I wanted to have some white, you know, the hairs of this in here, I would do it that way. I would put on the dark and then put white, tap, 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 white. I don't do that anymore. I put on the power of the white. I step back and look at it and then paint out what I don't need. It's like here. See this shadow that's right here? I came right here with the big brush. As a matter of fact, I used the big brush, this one right here. This is a side stroke. You can see the width of that stroke with the brush. And I set the brush down, fully loaded with white, and drug it like that. And then after that came off there, then I picked up the dark and added that little bit more transparent shadow right there, taking out the little edge because I thought that was too much of an edge there to there. So I took some of it out. So in other words, like all this movement here, this is all a big stroke of white down through this area, and then I put dark in on top of it. Whereas before, I would use white stroke, white stroke, white stroke, white stroke, and through there. Like you can see the brown sitting on top of the white here. It's a different way of doing that. And I started doing that when I started to look at, and one of the guys that did it was the father of all wildlife painting, Carl Ringus. I started looking at all of Carl Ringus's paintings where he put his progressions of color. And that changed the way I paint everything now. Changed everything. My whole perception of painting completely changed when I started to look at his application of color and realizing that dark paints out light. And so I don't want to come in here. I want my white highlight to have maximum impact. So I take a lot of paint and I go blam right there like that, as brave as I can get. And then I take my small brush with some dark and lift it out. Now, do you want to see another version of that? Is I put up this last month a seascape, right? Some of you saw the seascape. I put it up on YouTube and that. And towards the end of the seascape, you see me take this big scraper, and I take a lot of paint and I just go right across the whole edge there with a big light stroke, like the water in the front. I go with a lot of paint and put a huge stroke of light water in there, and then I take a smaller brush with dark color and push out what I don't need. Dark takes out light. But I put on the light as big and as casual as I can get, because that's the expressive, powerful stroke that Anton and Robert Hagen and all these guys talk about. That's the big, powerful, expressive strike of color. And then I remove what I think I don't need with the dark. Dark takes out light. Whereas before, I would go with my white, trying to put on my little highlights. And none of those strokes have power. You don't read the energy of that stroke. Does that make sense? Yes. So it's a different way of looking at it. So it's just kind of like, you can feel the power of this, of the energy of this coming down. And I don't remember exactly, but that was like almost one big powerful stroke here. And I pushed these because I think that's basically how I did it. That's how I do it now, is put that light on just like that, and then take my dark brush and push it back out into what I don't need, but leave the power of that stroke. Yeah, Jay.
Karen wants to know if you're going to do this for a lesson. Are you going to paint a hair for a lesson?
This
she wants to loosen up and paint more impressionistically.
Yeah, and this is where I put it on to, I put this on and I put it on Facebook and let everybody see it and everything, and said maybe this is for a DVD. And I just wanted to try. I learned a lot. This whole painting changed me completely. I'm going to paint more wildlife, because those wildlife, that fur and that animal fur and my kipper dog and all that stuff is very sensitive to that power stroke. And so I have to plan that power stroke. So yes, that's my plan, is I'm going to do some more of this, because guess what? All of that is going to totally change how I paint flowers. We're going to have a year of discovery. It's going to totally change how I present, and it already has. I painted a rose the day before yesterday, and that rabbit completely changed me. And I looked at that thing and I went, holy cow. But if I showed that right away to everybody, I'd lose about 10 students would die. That's what I would say, because they go, where did you come up with that? And it was I filmed this bird yesterday, and I put a posting up on my David W. Jansen page, and I painted you see all these roses down there through that, and I turned them into roses in the last second with 2 strokes of dark into everything else. Or otherwise, it was just this mottled color. And I realized the dark is what paints that rose, and I do 2 strokes, and it paints this rose, and it turned them right into roses, but they weren't roses beforehand. And it's a different way of doing things completely, because we paint so much with the light and our strokes of our light, planning our strokes of our light, and I pack the power of the light and then take it out where it doesn't need to be as powerful. It's a different way. I want to show you guys some of that stuff. Mm-hmm. We got to get into some of this stuff. Is that good? Are we good?
It's all right, yes. But the broken line on the branch, like why it's not a... Why
solid
does it
line.
skip so much?
I think also, I was just thinking about that too, Jess, and we saw the question was from
Roberta.
From Roberta.
This broken line, why it broke
about how that happens, but also, Dave, when you look at
this right here, that's my finger. I went, oh God, there's too much of a line, and went, boop, took my finger and pulled it out.
Well, when I look at the painting of the hair, I see
I got to show you guys that. Sorry.
Varied. I see so much varied textures, and both the amount of paint, the thickness of the strokes, and then also the broken line is almost like almost an impressionistic of the branch. So
yeah,
this particular lesson needs to be filmed again with the cameras on.
Yeah.
So that so that other people can play with that idea of here in one painting, you have so many different visual differences in visual. They give you different visual effects.
Exactly.
All in one painting, you have these really defined strokes and lightweight, and then.
But you know what? What is
snowbanks?
What does the thing do to this rabbit? What it does is, I mean, it's a hare, it's a rabbit. But look at how interesting that thing is. Your eye travels through the colors, the textures, the movement. That's what you're saying. There's so much going on in here, and you know it's an interesting painting. Does that make sense? And the artist is not just controlling that with color. The artist is not just controlling that with using a 4 filbert or a filbert. The artist is controlling that with the powerful light stroke, how much textures they're using, the angle of the brush, how much they're painting back out. Textures, the power of that stroke. And where does it go back? Bill Anton, that says he wants to capture the power, the character, and the movement of a cloud in a single brush stroke. And that's what the artist tries to use. We try to break up. We try not to play. That's the big thing. Every time you touch the brush, it's like John Singer Sargent, the father of all painting, of all impressionist painting, said that you never, the most power a stroke has is the first application. From then on, it dies. And we would put on a stroke, and then we would touch it and touch it and touch it, feeling that we have to incorporate it or soften it out or do something like that. He doesn't. He goes bang, and he walks away from it. And that's the hardest thing to do as an artist. It is the hardest thing to do, is to put it on and walk away from it, or step at least six feet or so back from that.
You always wanted the freshness of the stroke too.
Exactly, the freshness of the stroke. But look at the character that it gives into this area of the painting. And then you're softening it out. The goal is to take all of this character of movement and soften it all the way out to nothing back here, down in here. And, and then when I put this on, I put this on and realized that's too much of a line. So I took my finger and went just like that. Boom. Just like that. Took out certain parts of it and stuff like that. If I was to do it again, that's too perfect right in there. If I was to do it again, I'd probably put this in and maybe put some of the blue over the edge of it to let that granulate and let that soft. That's how some of them do it. But
are you using any pure white in this?
Only in a few areas. It's not really pure white. It has yellow in it. I have a touch of yellow oxide into here and a touch of my gray from my violets and my blue.
One of the questions is that you often work white, that you often save white
for the very last.
However, which you did to highlight some of the areas on the hair, but for the most part, there is no
pure white.
White.
For the the looking of it of the pure white, you can barely see that has a little bit of yellow that's inside of that there. It's not a pure white. I very seldom use a pure white into a painting. This has the warmer yellow in it, changing its character just a little bit. It's an interesting painting, but the big thing is, more than anything else, is that it was a plan. I approached this with a plan. I've never painted a hare before. I'm excited to paint the fox, the turkeys, everything that everyone gave me all these wonderful ideas, and the brown cow out in Sydney. We'll do that too, Yvonne. But I'm excited to do some of those other things and apply these particular theories to. That's what I want to do, is apply these theories to. Does that make sense? We can do it all, and then we can look at these theories and say, oh, how's this going to change my flowers? How's it going to do this? It's art. And it doesn't make a difference whether you're painting a snowshoe hare or you're painting a rose or, a Couchois rose, a Mortimer's rose, or you're painting Napoleon III flowers, you're painting a landscape. How you apply those textures, the strokes you use, those edges, the color, the tone, all of that is art, and it doesn't make a difference what it is. You don't need to go out there and practice and practice and practice and practice roses. What you need to do is practice and practice and practice techniques and edges and colors and stuff. And then that helps you capture that element as simplistic as possible. That's where we are. That's where we are. That's what we're doing, today, right now with this. And you can paint a hare. It's my first one since my folk art rabbits of the 1980s. I have not done a rabbit in 25 years, and the last ones were folk art rabbits. So.
And you've come a long way, baby.
Yeah. But you know what? I've come a long way through texture. Yeah. That's the big thing, is the tech. Oh, yeah.
We use it every day.
Oh, yeah.
We use it every day in the office.
Use it every day. Yes, this was my folk art rabbit years ago. Matter of fact, if Tommy is on, I taught this in Hiroshima many, many, many years ago in Japan. In 1997, I taught this. Yeah. 20 years ago in Japan. Yeah.
Did you set the background of the hair first, or
this
for the hair?
Nope.
Did you?
Nope. The background is the last thing I painted. I painted the entire hair and set it. What I did first was this light and dark exchange right in here. Then that light dark exchange right in here. And Jessica, you guys came in and saw me 10 minutes into painting, and you went, "Oh my God, yes. That thing is amazing."
Yes.
And all I had done was set the light dark effect right into here, because this area right here is going to control everything I do in the painting. So you do, and what these wildlife painters and landscape painters do, what a lot of them, especially the wildlife painters, what they do is the background last. The background goes in last. And,
Roberta has mentioned how tricky backgrounds can be, even though they look simple.
Well, and that's the thing. Roberta, and that's great. That's a great question, because I used to always worry about those backgrounds and stuff. And the background is something that you don't paint. All you're going to do is take all your image from your center of interest, and you're going to reduce the contrast, everything. We're going to see that here. If I get over to that landscape tonight, we're going to see that, and we're going to reduce that back. You just got to, we get into the background and we feel, and I felt this way for many years, that we have to paint something. And now I'm getting to where all I have to do is create color movement and impression and let the viewer's eye see something. There's the difference. I don't have to paint it. I just have to give the impression of it. Because if I paint it too much, I compete against my center of interest, and I don't want to do that. So that's why I say that rabbit's eye here, this area right here controls everything. So I don't know how to paint this back here until I finish this. And really, I don't know how to paint this back here until I finish this area. Because all of this whole rabbit has to advance in front of that right there. Does that make sense?
So you worked your way front to back.
Yes, exactly. Setting that whole thing.
Because
this is my subject here.
Right. Which many people may have been taught
the other way.
Or perceived as the other way.
As the other way, exactly. What got me to do that? Westerns. I started doing that just this last year, even better at it, because I started to paint Westerns, which they control the story of the painting, the look and the story of the painting. They control what they're going to do everywhere else. Well, let me go over there real quick before we start running too much out of time, because there's a lot of stuff that I want to show you guys here. And I want to go over to this one here. Okay, let's go over there to this one. So this is, I introduced this artist to you in Sydney. It's one that I follow. He and Bill Anton and Tom Cox and all these Western painters that are absolutely phenomenal. This one I love because it's backlit. It's got cool. He's got warm into his backgrounds and everything. Jason Rich is an amazing painter, and this background, or what he has in here. Look at just the simplistic blobs of color. He's got a little bit of light and dark, which as you move back from it is going to say hills and stuff. And as you get into here, trees and stuff. But you look up real close at the painting, it's blobs of color. It is blobs of tones of violets and his warms. And his warms aren't as warm as what is going to appear in the front part of the painting. There's textures in there. There's no blending in this painting. There is no blending. It is optical strokes. It's just like what Monet says and everything in his paintings. There's no blending in any of this. And I look at, like, I'll look at something like here. Look at the texture that's in this watered stroke right here. You can physically see where he takes the flat brush right there, pulls it across there, and lifts it off and sets that stroke. You know, these little strokes here that give you the impressions of rocks. Where did this blue stroke come from right up in here, this dab of color? It's, you know, look at this. Does that look like water, like all of us would fuss around with and make all that water? But when you go back optically and set it back behind everything, it looks amazing. It looks absolutely amazing. And what he is doing is he is controlling the edges of what he's going to paint here to the edges of what he's going to paint here. And he's making a plan for his edges. But you'll see that certain edges of color, when I started studying him, certain edges that he'll blur out. See, he blurs out with a color right here as he puts in one other color. But do you see any blending even into this shirt up here? Do you see any blending? It's not. It's optical. He's an optical painter. And like, look at the hand and the reins that are right here that are just so simplistic. But when you put it into the painting, it works. So it's a plan. It is definitely a plan. And his lights and his darks and how he does stuff. And this is basically how I do the rabbit. And I started looking at his stuff of where he puts his lights and darks. And is he painting out lights and dark? You know, what is he using to paint out? And it's like I showed out in Sydney, how much blue. And Vivian, look at the blue that is used into those strokes. We were talking about that, the blue. The adding of the blue that's inside that horse that you would never, you know, expect. That's one thing that Jason Rich does. Yeah.
Do you have an idea of the size of that painting?
This one right here is like 36 inches long, and it's like 12 by 36, something like that.
You said that's Jason Rich, right?
Yeah, and you're looking at about $24,000 in a painting like this. So these are the masters of the, you know. But look at the water here, okay? Look at his textures. Look at the granule from the thick part to the granulated stroke that starts to happen. And when you sit there and you go, he doesn't come in here and paint a whole bunch of trees that we want. He wants to create a light and shadow side, a variation of color. He comes in and just blobs in the color. And as he's leaving an area, they granulate it. And that's what I'm looking at in this. But look at his mass tone, or what we call this, the local color right here, or what is called the local color where he's applying it. And this purple shadow is applied right on top of that light. See this stroke, this touch right here is applied on top of that light. This light tree right here is splashed on with a stroke right across like that. You can see the flat brush stroke right there. And then the dab of dark that came back in, that made the stroke. This shadow stroke here is put on top of this entire side of the tree. So is this tree trunk here. It's put on top of the light. It's painted last. This stroke is painted last. And I started looking at, they're painting the darks last. You know, not always, but, you know, it really works that way. And it's a great way to approach the painting. And you step back optically, this thing is phenomenal. The optics of it is really pretty. You know?
Vivian was commenting on how the blue all over, how it pulls everything together.
It does. And the little bits of blue that you see in the horse and in his jeans, and look at right up in here in his face. I looked at him and was like, man, how many of us could sit there and put that amount of bright red violet right into his face? But he's dealing with the cool side of a face here. And on the shadow side, because here's the light's from behind him. And so, I mean, how many of us can do this? And put that violet in there, put in a brown and then touch a violet in there, come into the white hat and put that blue in there and correct it. But when you put it back optically, man, that works. It works so very well. And that's where I'm going in learning this stuff. But one of the things is we got to learn to see what it is that we're seeing. Does that make sense? What it is that we're seeing, how to look at the painting through the eyes of the a person creating that look. But look at how cooled down and toned down the colors are through here, and then they slowly evolve here, coming warmer and warmer and warmer and warmer and lighter, and more stuff coming here and here and here. But the big thing is he's got a lot of detail here, so he paints no detail in any of this area here of the trees. They're mass tone, local color of what's called local color right in here of an element, and then he puts in a little bit of definition, but he doesn't go in there and tap his brush 1,000 times and make a whole bunch of leaves. He'll kill all of the contrast and the depth that he can have in the front of his painting. Does that make sense? And the same way, when you look at all of this up over here, look at it, all this movement, and you look at this and you look at this texture. Look at how much texture is now into the trees on this side, because they're closer than the trees over here. So there's more textures, and the colors get darker. And look at, he's put these textures on, and these are all painting some of that out too. That dark stroke is right on top of that grayed green. The dark paints out the light. That dark stroke is taking it out. This dark stroke right here is taking out that light. You can almost see where the stroke of the light was applied one direction here, then the dark, here was another dark taking it out, and then he stroked down this way to take it out a little bit differently. That's a technique that they use. And and it's magnificent, and the textures that he has here. And to do something like this is really hard, because we go in there and we want to paint a tree. And they go in there and they paint the impression so that when you step back, it looks magnificent into the painting. You don't want to go in there and be perfect. You don't want to go in there and be perfect. You want to be able to step back and look at it. He's a magnificent painter, and he's got a lot of stuff. And I've watched him. He's a young guy, and I've watched his paintings just get so much better. He is so good. He's beyond good. But he's beyond. He knows where to let it go, and he knows where to bring it forward. And he is so casual, but you look at a painting like this and it doesn't look that casual. But there's a lot of them. This is why I paint Westerns and why I practice Westerns, because the Western painters are magnificent for setting depth within a painting and stuff. Right? Right. Did I kill anybody? Sorry about that.
No, we're just sort of all enthralled with the movement of color and what we're all seeing. Oranges and places you wouldn't expect to see oranges, blue pulling everything together.
Well, and it's like what you say here. Right over here, like this area, you see this kind of yellow orange right in here, and it pulls right across to the horse to the front of his depth area that's right in here. And there's a theory in landscape painting that you take one dominant color from your center of interest type area, and you repeat it throughout the painting, heading it back to its atmosphere, to the atmospheric part of it. And that's this color right here in his painting. That's that color that's right there. That's the color he's traveling through his painting, through the entire painting, taking the viewer on a visual journey through that main color. And that's the theory. And I looked at that and I was just like, holy cow, he's applying that theory. And the theory is, if you can do it to one color and do it specifically to that color, then you create greater depth in your painting. Mm-hmm. And one guy I watched that was working on the theory, and he was talking about it in one artist magazine and stuff. He was saying that you would think you'd logically use a green like a tree, and he doesn't use that because that's just too much into a landscape. He'll grab usually a beige or a dirt color and do it with that and travel that color, and that harmonizes the painting better. But it's fantastic. Looks at it. I want to you still with me, everybody?
Yes.
Still with me?
Yes, everybody's still with you.
No one died?
No.
Okay. because this is fantastic. This is the kind of stuff I like to do, and it's nice to share this with everybody. This is like the premier landscape painter today. His name is Clyde Aspervig. He is like, his paintings go upwards of, $150,000. He is magnificent in working, and this is one I studied for a long time because I started to look at how he paints his techniques of his trees. So you sit there and you look at all the brush movement and look at the power. See, that's just a big brush stroke right there of light color, just bang, bang. And how much, what I'm balancing here is looking at Clyde Aspervig versus, Ken Knight, and what Ken Knight says about a painting having really powerful verticals and horizontal strokes. And his color, what he's using with his textures, look at how much more textures are in there. Look at that big textured stroke that's right there. And then how he paints trees back here is just nothing. Now, Karen Marshall made a wonderful observation of that the other day when I posted up the elk. She said, I'm seeing how you paint trees in the distance. You're just painting the impression of and putting on the field of color, and then we're seeing trees. That's exactly true. That's exactly what Clyde Aspervig does here. Is he's traveling it back here, he's getting less and less, the warm color diminishes back to the atmospheric part of the color back through here. His darks are shadowed, the warm color has diminished back, and they're not painting trees here, they're just painting movement, light and dark movement, so that when you start stepping back, that becomes a very soft unit area. But as it gets back here, you start to see the granulation of the strokes. See the granulation of the strokes? He is a big master of granulation of some of his strokes. But you'll see that he'll do that types of techniques with all of his paintings back here. This is a magical one stroke of a color here, and then a downstroke of a lighter color. But it looks like the top of a mountain back there, and that's one stroke of the brush. Look at look at the shorelines here. You can see the stroke of the brush, the horizontal strokes of the brush, massive horizontal strokes that set it, and then some little touches of light. But these trees here you can see they're big horizontal strokes and then broken up with the darker color. This darker color is set on top of that one. So this is a big brush stroke across and dark color of the tree trunk in front of it. It's a different way of looking at painting. And I study him all the time. At least 1 to 2 days a week, I sit down and I look at Clyde Aspervig's paintings. This one was just sold up at, I watched this painting for a long time. This one just sold at a Coeur d'Alene art auction for $65,000. This is a 36 by 40 painting. It's a big painting. But I love this painting. I loved his granulated strokes. See his lights of his water and the granulation that he leaves inside of that. Look at this, like this hillside here. These are just massive big strokes pulling down with that color and that tone, just going bang, there's that tone. But when you look at this, his first stroke was a light one, and then he took a dark stroke and painted out the light. And this is what I do on that beach, when I paint the beach on that seascape that I showed you guys. That's exactly the way which I approach that beach. I put on the light and then painted out what I don't need with the dark. But again, look at how he paints his trees and gives the impressions of it. I look at his texturing, his the texturing that he does in his strokes and everything. And it's hard to find really good photos of it because they don't want you to see everything that they do. But see,
that goes into a question Deanne's asking. So you get this depth and optical blending with the texture techniques, but then how do you photograph it so that someone else can see it more from?
And that's a really good question. And Dean, whoops, wrong one. I got to go back over to this one here. Let's go back over to this one. Too many cameras. That's a real good question, Deanne, because I was sitting there going, well, how do you photograph that? And I went out there and searched a professional photographer was talking about how he photographs impressionistic paintings, and he uses a softening filter. And so he looks at them from different distances and stuff, and then he uses a filter that's going to give him about 15 feet into that photo. So that when he takes that photo, he says most of the time, he says 90% of the time when he's shooting an impressionist, or this is what these artists are called representational artists. It's a whole different category of painter that has really come about in the last 10, 15 years. It's called representational art. And you can look that up, and you got all these guys that are now call themselves a representational art. And he said when he's photographing representational art, he puts it on a softening filter so that it doesn't capture all of that. So it's like I'm going to photograph that at about 4 feet, but I'm going to use a filter that takes it back to 15 feet, softening it just a little bit, blurring it just a little bit, so that you'll get that optical distance of looking at it at 15 feet. It's an interesting look to it. But he's just got it's beautiful in his his working in here, his brush work into here, how it all changes, his rocks, his movement, his brush work, his granulation. I've looked at all these with the colors and the tones. It's really wonderful. He's quite a painter. And so here's another one that I just thought was awesome. Now, this one, I really wanted to show you this one. I have hundreds of his paintings all saved. I like his stuff. Look at his
pictures
stuff.
Or
pictures.
Are you hoarding paintings?
No, I'm not hoarding paintings. Honey, we can't have a car if we buy one of his paintings. But I want to show you guys this one. I wanted to show you guys this one. And Deanne, this one will blow you away, because if you like that blue stroke into the rabbit, now let's take it to the other side. Let's look here for a second at the white strokes. Here comes the white, right? And the white is granulating here, but the white is taken out with the dark as a backstroke coming back up the other way. So, and then you look at the difference here between the sunlight of the snow and this side of it here. Look at, you can see the individual strokes. And this is when a landscape presents it, like the painter goes like this. They follow one other rule called start big, finish little. And so he starts with big brushes, big strokes, puts it all in, finishes with smaller strokes, little strokes, textures, granulations, and stuff like that. But some areas they leave big. These are these trees. Look at how simple these trees are, and look at the simple and he uses a lot of texture, a lot of granulation to break his edges. See his broken edges and everything. See the granulation. This is that granulation stroke, or letting it just fade out, which helps give you that what we call the optical edge. And how easy are those rocks? But when we step this back, now look at those rocks. They look amazing. And look at everything that's in there. It looks absolutely amazing, because this is an optical painting, painting the warm and the cool of the painting. But this is the stroke that I want to freak Deanne out with. This one. Look at the one stroke flat brush light. That's just right there. Here's the stroke. Here's the back mountain. Just stroke. You can see the strokes of paint. But this one optical yellow and white, slightly toned down grade stroke that says the light back there is applied. Well, first here's the first low light, which is the cool, one stroke down. So he's piking his flat brush, making one stroke down, lighting it, warming it, and hitting one more stroke right there to put that in. So then step back and look how amazing that looks into the painting. And there's no blending to it. There is it's an optical stroke of color and texture, and there's no blending to it. So tell me where there's a blend, in that stroke. You don't see the blend.
Deanne's all caps. Oh my, wow.
Yeah. And how many times do we play with a painting back there instead of making that optical? Now, your color has to be dead on accurate. And so you've got to so before you make a stroke like that, you have to have a plan. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You have to have a plan. That color has to be in your mind. You have to set that foreground. You have to set your center of interest. You have to know where you're going to go with it. Then you execute it and you get out of there.
So you think palette knife, brush in this painting?
Yes, he's a palette knife and brush painter.
Combination of the two.
He uses bristles, he uses sables, and he uses palette knives. Okay. Mm-hmm. And this guy is beyond good. You know, he is beyond good. But it's just, how many of us would play the heck out of that? And he leaves a lot of this and hits his highlights into the granulation of the stroke. Into certain areas, he granulates it. Even on the back edges of his mountains, granulate into the sky. And he grabs them back and forth. See this little mountain that's right here? This little edge here? He created that mountain with a blue sky stroke. That's not this stroke pulling it. That's blue sky painting out the edge of that mountain there. A lot of landscape painters will do that. They work it back and forth. You can see, now when you step in that, you can see the flat brush stroke that's right there. That's taking that out. There's a lot of really good stuff in his paintings. Really good stuff in his paintings. And his trees get different and everything like that. He's just an incredible painter. This is one I was showing Jessica earlier that I wanted to show you guys. And I want to know what he sees. This is Clyde Espervigden. This is the pool in Yellowstone Park. And we're going there this summer because I'm going to stand there and take the picture of that pool.
This is great because it works, and Yvonne was talking about translucency underwater.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Can you work that into this discussion?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's an optical effect. Translucency in water is just an optical effect. And so he painted this. He went to Yellowstone and painted this. And I really wanted to get up to Yellowstone to this pool this year and take a picture of this and see. Because this is when he says in there, this is here, and he paints a lot up into the Rocky Mountain National Forest. And I'm going to go to every single place that he set up and took a photo. And so I can look at what he saw and what he did. But I was looking at this one. And so I started hunting around the internet to see if I can find this same pool. And I found a picture of it. I found an exact picture of it, of that pool, from the same angle it is that where he was painting. And I started seeing stuff that he did. So I started setting the two photos together here and seeing what he changed inside that photo to create a painting. So it starts telling me, you know, what is he looking at? So many of us take a photo and then we copy the photo. And a true master doesn't do that. They take the photo and they paint a painting. And they create that painting. And, you know, I start to look at everything. You know, when you look at this right here, you can see immediately he took the road out, which I probably do too. But he changed a lot of things of this. And this really fits his palette that he paints. He paints warm. He paints very warm colors. And his palette colors that he has, he changed the total real colors of the composition here inside of this and got rid of the grass and carried his dirt forward. There's certain parts about the pool that he changed to get his subject matter a little more interest, you know. And I always wonder, is this rock that's right here, this rock here, is that the rock right there? Is that the same rock? I mean, some things he left in, like this light edge of the thing here is this edge here. And he's got some of those shadows you can see. But this, like Jessica and I were discussing, this one is taken probably about 3 o'clock in the afternoon because the light is slightly high and to the right. And this one is taken more directly at noon, so the shadow's a little more up and down. The shadow's a little more at an angle. But you can see the colors of the pool and the colors that he changed. But look at this right here. This is one big horizontal stroke of medium color that sets what is called the strong horizontal in the painting. And that told me a lot about his technique. Then he varied it from there, but that tells me a lot about his painting. And that's the same type of, those of you out in Sydney this year, I introduced you to Ken Knight. And that's the same type of thing Ken Knight does. That's the same thing that I started doing this last year, is establishing that strong horizontal of color. But he changes a lot of things. And he changes a lot of things, people, because he is an artist painting a painting. He is not copying exactly what is there in nature. He is creating a harmonious, beautiful painting and using the ideas, the inspiration from nature, what is there. You got to change it. Just like I took a photo of a rabbit and changed it to what I needed to paint a painting. And learning those tools, we have to get this toolbox full so we can do that kind of stuff. What is it about this photo that does not, this pool on the left, what is it about it that he felt he had to change to make a more beautiful painting, as opposed to just, why did he change some of those different things in there? And that's what you look at. That's what's going to make you into the true artist, is determining what is it about your story that you have to change to make it flow better, to make the colors better, to give it more life and energy. And different artists will approach that same thing slightly different, and some of the things that I when I studied this and I looked at it, is like into he travels his shadows, his underwater shadows, further back here. Okay, and I was just like, okay, so he travels that further back, but then he put the river coming into it on the left, whereas in the photo it's coming in on the right. So he traveled it back this way, out and back, where that's flowing out of that pool, right back through there, breaking it up and adding some of those that interest right back through there. He changed a lot in in the actual photo, making a little bit better journey. Okay, and he's also journeying through the shadows. Everything is drawing you down in this way, whereas the shadows here hold you in a circular line here. See how it holds your eye circular here? He traveled the shadows to put the deep part of the pool, but traveled them out and moved your eye through the violet to the background, for a little bit further out, moving your eye a little bit more. And he can do that with his powerful horizontal ground stroke, where he's doing it with his shadow. And you see that with his shadow there. So it's a little different. He has a great way to approach the painting. He has a real great way to, approach the painting. Now I'll flip back up over here to this other shot here, because we're going to change up some of the stuff, and we're going to do a little bit of painting with you before it gets too late here. We're just going to show you how to go about setting something up. And what I'd like to do is kind of like, I'll show you how I set something up and apply some of this, and I'll just do it real quick in this, and then you can practice it and you can try something like this. And it's just a setup. It's like, what I do now is, like, I'll take a small board and do a thumbnail, what we call a thumbnail painting of it, to set the movement where I'd like strokes and some of my colors. And a lot of the artists, I noticed that Ken Knight and all those will do those and then take it back to and create the studio painting from that, which has more work, more defined edges, and more of the pure planning of the painting. So I want to show you how to go about something like that, and we're going to look at a photo with that. Is everyone okay so far?
Yes. Yeah, there was a little wondering if he did plein air or if he worked it in.
He paints plein air. That's a very good question. He paints plein air. He says he'll take no more than 2 hours onto a plein air painting. He paints a thumbnail, and then he goes back and paints it into a big studio painting. So this is the studio painting from his thumbnail. You can put Clyde Aspervig into the Google. You'll get tons of photos, and then you'll see some of his plein air, a very few. He doesn't show them very often, his plein air thumbnail paintings. But you can see him painting in the field, painting a thumbnail. That's where he just captures it all. And then, like a lot of the representational artists do, they take a lot of digital photographs, they take them back, put them up on the big, huge monitors, which is, I'm going to have a discussion with Martha this year about that. I need a bigger monitor. And then puts those up on the big monitors, captures and adjusts the colors, and then makes a plan and executes the painting. They don't go out in the field and try to do something like this, plein air completely, because the light changes too fast to do everything that you're going to be doing in a big painting. And his paintings, a lot of his final works, I mean, some of the small ones are 16 by 20s, but most of them are 3 feet, 4 feet, and big high prices and stuff. So they're very, very different. But I want to walk you through a couple of things here. Is everyone okay? So we'll do some of that. We'll make a plan here, and I'm just going to show you. I do this. I practice this kind of stuff all the time, and so we're going to come over here to this one here. So this is a photo, and you can go out and you can find all kinds of photos. I just collect all kinds of photos. This is one I was thinking about, maybe a story with the pack horses and stuff like that later on. But I'll look at a photo like this as how would I take this and create this type of look into a painting, and what is it about this that I would change? What are some of the things about this that I would, how would you change this into a painting? Now, I started to learn to do this years ago when I painted in landscapes, when I did my very first Bierstadt, and I started studying Bierstadt. And I showed in this one DVD series where, this one mountain that he had painted up in the Rocky Mountain National Forest, he added basically 1,000 feet to the mountain to make it more dominant in the painting than it really was. But I start to look at, when I'm looking at a painting here, how am I going to capture this effect? First off, the depth of field here is only about maybe a mile. And if I want to make a really, really interesting painting or do a Clyde survey, I've got to get this closer to like 10 miles. The curvature of the earth is 35 miles, like we talk about in the landscape class. But I got to push this mountain back. So that's going to be part of my plan, is to push this mountain back. Things about this painting that I don't like is the V shape back here. That is just too dominant into the painting. So I'm going to you would soften that back. You won't paint what you see, especially if you want to draw the viewer up here. This V shape holds your eye really hard back there. So you're going to have to change. I would change that just a bit. The other thing I don't like about this painting, I like that, remember in the landscape class we talk about the triangles and the visual journeys that stands. This triangle here in the visual journey is very nice. However, this one lines up with that one. Too much of a long, samey line into the painting. So I would look at some way of breaking this line, maybe one more time with another ridge line or something like that, to change that so it's not quite so much same. So you get another bump. In other words, add another bump. And, if I wanted to paint for ultimate depth, maybe you would look at adding another mountain range back here that might have some snow or something onto the back of it back there. That would give you even further visual depth. I would soften this out into some more of a valley shape right here like this, so that it doesn't pull your eye quite as much. Does that make sense in there?
So that mountain, it softens the mountain line.
Yeah, exactly.
The impact of that line.
Yeah, it softens the mountain line, softens the impact of that
ridge line.
of that line. And so there's certain things that I would change. Now, could you paint it like this? Absolutely. Could you copy that photo and get that? Yes. But this one definitely right here will create a problem for you.
But if you could because then you have to figure out what is your topic that you're painting. Is this a painting of a mule train, or is this a painting of mountains? Because those mountains have very strong impact. You pull your eye to the back.
Exactly.
And I want to see the horses.
That is exactly what that the landscape painter or the Western painter, and this is the one thing with it, that's the difference between a landscape and a Western. The Western's got to worry about their story. So you add that other element to the landscape of these guys here, that's going to change how you perceive your landscape and how much power you're going to paint into that mountain.
Are you going to paint these as mules as they are, or are you going to paint them as
No,
horses?
they're going to paint them. No. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to show them how I would go about setting up a quick color setup, because we're running out of time. We're real late. We're 2 hours into this already. But I want to show you guys how to do a quick color setup on how to do something like this. And I want to do lots of these this year. I'm going to do them throughout the whole color class with flowers, with everything. I want to show you how to, this is what I call the applied theory. Applying the theory. We have to apply the color, we have to apply the tone, the light, the intensity, the whole thing. How to go about, take a photo like this and turn that photo like Clyde Aspervig did with that pool of water, how to turn it into a painting. That to me is the exciting part, to create it. How do I look at a photo of a hare and paint it into a painting that looks nice? So one of the things that I learned that I liked what Ken Knight and some of the others were saying is he immediately starts to look into his painting for where he says every good landscape has to have a super strong horizontal, and it has to have a certain number of strong verticals to have that particular interest to the painting. And so that's what I do now with my landscapes. In the last 6 months, I've totally changed. Not completely changed, but added another element to my plan, my visual plan. First off, I'd want to paint these trees over here with more verticals, a little bit more shadows and everything. As they go back here, I'm going to need just color spots. Does that make sense? Color spots all the way back in here. But there is a good, strong horizontal that I can put right up through here into my painting. I can then take it back at an angle this way and bring it forward on an angle this way here. That's some of the stuff I look for. Where can I do that horizontal? Because I like what Ken Knight does. So the very first thing that I do is I look for that, and I look at where it is in the painting, and it's right about halfway. And so we would be establishing that. But before I start, one of the things I like to do is to establish just a little bit of my sky. And so I put up right in here, if I'm going to follow this, this is, of course, clouds. There's violets back there and all those things. I am going to just take the impression of this, and I'm going to start my sky. Those of you in the landscape class, we know that we start our skies at what value? What do we start our skies out in value-wise? We start our skies out somewhere between 8 and 10. 8 and 10 is always where we start that out, because that's the atmosphere. And when you get up to 8 and 9 and get up towards a 9, that means value 9 light blue. I'm just putting out some colors here. Value 9, this is phthalo blue and white. Value 9 means that I've set up 35 miles of distance into the color. That's what a value 9 does for you as an artist. It adds the 35 miles of distance. And as you get closer and closer and closer, you get up to, we always say the top part of the sky, which is usually, if you look straight up, is about a value 5. I'm going to put in a little red violet out here. So before I go in here and do any of the real painting of anything, I'm going to set the tone of the light of the painting here. Let me step back just a little bit more so it's easier to thrill and amaze you. Okay, I'm going to set this up for a reference right here for just a second, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to make a really, really light value 9. Of course, Dave has his value scale right in front of him. Not. Forgot that. But we're going to make a real light color here. And usually we know that acrylics and everything dry darker, right? They dry darker. And so we make it a little bit light. So here's your white. So your palette's white. So you're going to go almost that. But I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to plow that on. And I don't always like to do big long horizontal strokes. I like to move the color a little bit. I know from my plan, from basically my statement of painting that comes through here, I'm going to move my up towards a 6 or a 7 up and through here. I can get, if I'm doing ultimate depth, I can go up to my 5s, and I'll change it. I'll make it a little bit more of a blue, a phthalo blue, so my blue changes in my sky. But I don't play with it. I make a quick statement. I make quick statements of color. I'm going to take this light color right down. A lot of times you see me paint those other landscapes. I'll push the light color, some of the light around, which will create almost the impression of little clouds and stuff back here through. But the first thing is, it's a quick statement of the color, and I'm going to can't find it anywhere, Huck, so I took some of those out.
I go into your filming studio to look for a value scale, and there's just birds everywhere.
Yeah,
stacks of bird pictures everywhere.
Yeah, that's because I was doing birds, and that's one of the things. That's one of the things I do is when I'm painting birds, I put birds everywhere. So I take inspiration from birds. I had it in a stack It was in this stack here, actually, if I look for it.
And I know they're around.
No, I have them, always have them here.
I know we always, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I know there's
right
always
here.
one
Here, I have
on the
one.
table somewhere.
Have your value scales and stuff out. Even though you're really, you may be great with color, boy, but you have those things out because your eye references those, and you got to know. So here I put this down here first. Now, if I'm going to attack this, I like this to tack up just a little bit. If I'm going to be painting this, though, the very next thing I look for, before I even go draw the mountain sometimes, is I look for that strong horizontal color. And I'll put out some other color here so I can capture that. I'll put out a little bit of my pine green here. And this is, if I'm doing a plein air, this is how I would attack it. And this is how a lot of the masters attack. Not everybody, everybody's different. Your job as the artist, especially if you're learning, you're starting to find your own way, is to learn how as many different artists do it, and then start finding your way, combining them together. You may take a little bit of Jason Ritz and a little bit of Clyde Aspervig and a little bit of Hagen and some Knight thrown in every once in a while, and find your way. That's the goal.
Trudy's asking if you're mixing any water extender into your paint.
Sometimes. Yeah, I mix just a little. I don't have any extender out right now. I'm mixing in just water. And because this is the goal when you're doing a painting like this, when you're doing a thumbnail, is you have 2 hours. You have no more than 2 hours. So you've got to move. And so in this photo here, in this photo that's right here, there's a horizontal that I can capture right through here. Now, if you look close, I want you to look real close at this and prepare to be thrilled and amazed. Okay? When you look at this, do you see the power stroke? Do you see where you can come in here like this with a flat brush of color, pull it right here with a granulated stroke, and let it start to pick through and start to granulate out? You can see the color movement here, as this photo really does look like a power stroke of this flat, like you applied it with that flat. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Do you see that?
I do see that.
This is what the artist looks for. They sit back, they look at it, and I can see them now. 2 years ago, I couldn't see them. And then I started painting a few Westerns. I started looking at, what is that Western? How is he doing that? You can see that. Can you see right here? Now, notice how the color lightens, gets a lighter green. Do you see the stroke right here? There's another one right there. Do you see that? And you may come back with a darker stroke, and then you may take that dark, because dark paints out light, and just tap it through just a little bit. So you may put some of that stuff in there.
We're on a time lapse over here.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
There it is.
There it is. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
You see the stroke?
Yeah. That is awesome.
Right in there.
You start to see it. See, you guys are all taking the same drugs as I am now. No, what it is after we start to stare at how these artists do it, you start to see it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You start to see it. And this is what I do. I stare at these things a couple hours a night, and, but look at this, look at the right in through here. Here's a light stroke, which, I'm not quite sure what that is. It might be snow right there. A patch of snow, because there is some snow up on this side of the hill, and the violets, you can see it. But look at the granulation. See that granulation right in there? You see that granulated stroke? That is the depth. That's the stroke of depth that the landscape painters look for. But look at that whole thing. You could set that in right with, even take your brush at it if you're using one, and set that stroke in. Does that make sense? Now the thing is, so you sit there and you sit back, you grab your cup of coffee, you look at this thing, and you look at it because you've got to paint it with as simple strokes as possible. So you look at, I want to capture that right in there like that. I want to capture this strong horizontal. I'm going to capture the horizontal, then I'll come back and adjust it with the light and adjust it with another stroke, adjust it with a back stroke, and adjust it with a dark, and adjust it with a light. Does that make sense? Start to plan which stroke comes first. And for me, and for what Ken Knight does, is he makes that horizontal stroke first. Okay? And for what I like to do, as I started to do more with like the seascapes and stuff like that, let me step back a little further. So what I like to do is I'll take and I'll find a color that's going to be close. And that is a real dirty yellow sienna color that's there. I don't have to have the color exact because I can go back over and work it again. I want to get it real close though. So it's going to be a dirty, and I know there's a bit of glare there, but sorry about that. I can't show you everything perfect, but I'm going to take some sienna, some green, and some yellow, and I'm going to come close to that particular color on that strike, and I can adjust it with another one there. But the first thing I'm going to do is say, okay, that stroke in my horizon is going to be my powerful horizontal, and I'm going to come up about halfway or so there. And what I like about what Knight does is he just takes his line like this and he drags it through, and he applies the first part of that line. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to enhance it. I'm going to model the color just a bit here. I'm going to come back like this, and I'm going to drag it again here with some of that color. Each time picking it up, maybe I push it back. Sometimes I push it back like this and put it. And what I'm doing is I'm applying the variation of that tone. Does that make sense? And I wish that we didn't have this delay. You guys are supposed to say yes, David. Yeah.
Yes, Dad.
Yeah. Yes, Dad. Yeah. I'm watching how that stroke goes on. Sometimes, you know, I will take another brush, or I even like through here, a blue brush or something like that, and I'll help break the edge or soften the edge or do something like that. Sometimes what I do too is I use my finger and I break that over, but I'm starting to apply. As I'm making that stroke like that, I'm starting to try to capture the look that I'm seeing in there. Does that make sense? Widening that out. Now, when you look at this, and I'm going to make these strokes first before I come in and do the mountains, but I see a little bit more green and a little bit cooler, a little bit more blue, green and a little bit more blue stroke that's going to set back here at the angle here into the back. The big thing is, do you guys see it? I just want you to see it and just begin to see it. You don't have to know how to do it perfectly, but just see it. So I'm going to make a slight angled stroke back like this. That's going to take that green back just a bit there. And so that sets my main horizontal part of my painting. If I want to make those forward slanted ones, I can go like this real quick. Make a quick statement over here of that slant that's right there. And then I might come in and go back up and start to sketch just a bit of my mountain. Make my color very atmospheric. Make my color, lots of my atmosphere into my colors. They're browns here onto this one. I'm just going to make a quick statement of this mountain because this is going to change into its color. I'm going to come right back up over here. We're going to come up this high. We're going to set that V-shaped one in there. I want to keep this dry and granulated so it's easy to change. And I'm going to drag up over this side. That's going to be the mountain coming up here. We'll pick up a little more color right in here. And we're going to start this angled part that's going to come to the back. Now, maybe we have another bump into the mountain back here. Maybe we add another little one back here to break that up just a bit. But we've got this big angled one that's got to come back here like this. I'm not painting the mountain right now. I'm kind of dry brush sketching it. We'll kind of just swoop that out there this way just a bit. Does that make sense?
Dave,
so yeah.
I'm sorry. There's an interesting conversation going on about.
They're not supposed to have interesting conversations without me.
Well, you know, one of the things you said is that you study all these different people, and then you take what you've learned and you bring it together, and you develop your path of your own style. But then that leads to a question about, but I start off Karen asked, I started out with a design strictly following the directions, and suddenly I find myself doing my own thing. The way I find myself doing my own thing the way I want it to look. Is that a bad? She's asking, is that a bad thing?
Yes and no.
I think and this you
the thing is that who's that, Karen?
Yeah, Karen. It's and there's a conversation. Some people
exactly. Well, see, this is the thing, Karen. See, this is the thing, Karen, is that before you even start that painting, you need to establish a goal. What is the goal of this painting?
Did you see my comment?
And yet then Jessica pops up. I agree. You have to experiment, but it
depends on the goal of the painting.
Exactly. Need I say more?
No, please elaborate in my own words.
You need to have the goal of the painting. For example, the rabbit I painted, that was the goal. I set a goal for myself of this is what I wanted to do, the texture, the fur, how I was going to impart it. That kept me from applying my bad habits that I've generated with other things. If you say I'm going to paint what I like, you will never be a successful artist. I don't paint what I like. I paint everything. And I try to get my feeling, my look. I try to find my look. I try to get my customer started. You take somebody like Clyde Aspervik, who's been painting for 50 years, and he has a look and he has collectors and he's satisfying that. But getting there, he studied everyone to get all of the ideas, and so that he did not develop any habits. There's a difference between habits and your style. There's a real big difference. But where you are when you're learning, like where I'm learning here, I am constantly trying to avoid habits, breaking my habits. You'll have habits with roses, so they all look out the same. And the big habit that most people have with roses is we use too much white. We immediately go too much white. And so our paintings become just these white blobs because we use too much white, because we always learn that get lighter as you come to the front, we add more and more and more white, pretty much all. That's a habit. That's a bad habit, but that's a habit. What's the goal of your painting, and can I reach that goal? And so I paint different paintings with different goals, which constantly cause me to break my habits, so I don't develop habits. I spent so many years trying to break my habits, learning how to do things. So I go paint westerns, I go paint landscapes, I go paint roses, I go paint seascapes and everything. I never use my brush exactly the same way for too long, because I will create a habit. Does that make sense? I don't want to have any habits. And if you paint what you like, you're going to paint right into your habits. So if you're following along and then you slide into, I'll paint it the way I like it, and then you'll paint your habits, and maybe you're happy with it. Yes, but you don't grow. You don't grow. So that's the one thing is, I never say I don't like something. I never say I'm painting something I don't like. I try to capture effect. I love studying the color of it, breaking it, analyzing it, and picking apart how I'm going to paint something. And so here on this, so like with this mountain here, I'm setting up all this granulation in here and starting to get some of the effect that I might have here on this, putting on this one. I haven't really started to paint anything. I would, a lot of times like when I'm attacking a mountain like this, I know back here I've got to set more, I've got to get atmospheric. So I'll take my tan colors here, I'll put my sky in it. There's 1,000 ways to do it, but I'll put my sky into it and set my atmosphere right back through here, back like this. Before I even set my light and dark, I'll set some of my atmosphere in to it. So I know these back here have got to become more like the sky so that they disappear, and then that color can slowly become into here. And maybe some ways I do it really, really quick. And I know my shadows and my shadow tones, I get more of my siennas, my darker tones, a little bit of my greens, my cooler tones. Let's get a little bit of violet into this also right up in here because it's cool. And I'll set some of these sliding darker tones in through here. I'm just going to set the movement of it here. This is a quick thumbnail sketch of I'm looking for the movement. So am I capturing with some of that color, am I capturing that downstroke movement? Now, that you're going to see here. Now you're going to have trees. Your first look at your trees is you don't go in there and paint trees. your first thing of your trees. And I noticed this on Clyde Aspervig. When one of the things that he showed during the painting process, he was showing one of these photos that I found is that in his early trees, he just took the green and he pulled a model green brush back like this, a strong horizontal, before he came in with his brush and painted in the verticals on top of it. So he's looking for strong verticals and horizontals into the painting of that area here, into his color. He's painting it and setting in the impression of that work. And he may come up in here and just hit a few areas in here like this and start to set some of the impression of some of those colors. He gets more atmospheric. If you're going to take that green, you're going to go to the back. You're following good landscape stuff. You're going to get more atmospheric with some of that green as you go back through here, as they go further back. You know, some of the stuff I do into the landscapes and stuff, and when I'm painting stuff, if I'm going to set in, you start looking for little things like setting into your tree. So you set up the color that you're going to have, then you look at what does that area really have here. Okay, so let's look back. Let's go back and paint something back here, depth into the back. Look back here. You see they're very close in value, dark spots and light spots happening right in there. You've got to capture that effect. Those are trees, but you don't have to go in there and paint trees. You have to capture the effect. Does that make sense? You got to capture the effect. So if I'm painting back into there, how am I going to capture, or what technique? And this is what I practice. This is what I do. So I might take a smaller brush. Sometimes I do it with a bigger brush, but I might find close to that color. I don't have to be exact, but I like to try to get very close to it, that toned dark color back there. So I'll find that. Sorry about the glare there, guys. And then I'll take this and I'll drag that through that area here like this, dragging that through, sometimes creating the vertical, the horizontal, and I overpaint it. Sometimes I overpaint it with light and dark. And then I'll come back, pick up some of my light mountain color and paint back through it. Like this, tapping it through. This is how they do it. And I start to create, and I can create a stronger angle to make it look like a slope, tap in through. I like it better when it's acrylic and it dries up a bit so I can get some softer. So I usually let it dry up a bit, but I'll tap through like this to start to, and if I see a dark spot that's a little bit aggressive, I'll just go over it just a touch here. But I start to look to see if I can capture that area, the look of that area. Does that make sense? And I try to capture that as quickly and effectively as possible without getting too bogged down. You always hear them say, don't get bogged down by the details. Don't bog yourself down in all of the details of the painting. So, you know, we don't want to do that, you know. So I'll widen this out. Maybe I'm going to take this into a little bit of a slope, have a bit of a shadow, a little bit of a slope, and I'll work this several times. I'll work the lights and the darks in here and look and see if we put a little bit of a slope on that shadow. Push that back, tap that back through. And you know, you gotta constantly be thinking, I've got 2 hours. You know, the sun's moving, the light's moving. I just want to capture edges, move, you know, as quickly as possible. What I want to do is capture the impression of it. You know, there's, like Martha said earlier, she saw in there, well, okay, there were some dark trees. Well, yeah, there's trees up here. You know, are you going to put those trees in there? There's little points of them. Like you can take some of that in there, little verticals, and create the idea of those little verticals in there and put the idea of little trees, you know, and you create the idea of like little slopes. I'll take a lighter kind of tan color here, back paint up against those and pull the slope in slightly at that angle. And I can put that slope in, the movement of that slope, and I can start to refine. You know, there's things that you look into the painting, like here's got that angled slope that's right there. Okay, when you look at that angled slope that's right there, you know, you can almost see like the dry brush pulling of it down like that with a lighter tone and maybe some dark tones in there tapped in. So like if you're going to put that in, well, you grab yourself a slightly lighter tone. you'd find the tone exact, and I'm not going to take that much time, but I'd find the tone pretty much exact, and I'd find the way in which I can capture that movement, strike that down like that, and let that granulate out a couple of times. Let that granulate out so I capture that movement. That's what I'm looking for to apply that. And see that broken granulation movement in there? That is what gives you the depth or the interest in the edge of that hill, that mountain, that edging in there. That's going to give that optical. See, when I step back just a little bit, now that mountain's starting to take shape, see? And I look for those edges, those angles. This would be a little lighter, just a touch right in here. And I might push that in there, maybe a little bit of sky. Push that, get that angles in there. And see the optics of it is starting to create it. You can step back just a little bit more and you start to see, here comes that movement. And I start looking at and it's done really easy with a stroke, with one or two little strokes. Don't get bogged down in details. Try to capture that like Bill says, and try to capture that cloud in one movement, the character, the everything of it in one movement. Does that make sense? Did I kill them, Jay? Are they okay?
No, you did not kill them.
No, they're not okay, or no?
No, they're good. I was just Pat was asking about personal style. And how do you know when you have your own style?
When you sell a lot of paintings. When someone says, I've got to paint that. No, it's a journey. It's a journey. But you know what? That's a great question. My style has changed every year for the last 35 years. Mm-hmm. Everyone will always say, oh, I know David Jansen's roses and stuff like that. But my style has changed everything I do. So, and next year I'm going to be a different painter than I am this year, because I'm going to let some of these other artists change me. Does that make sense? So there's other trees in here. So I may I've got to figure out the atmospherics, the tone. I'm going to add some of the sky color. I'm going to put in some trees. I'm going to put in some verticals into that. Sometimes I'll touch and move that color around with my finger as well, because I spent so much time training my finger on roses that it works pretty good on trees too. But I'm going to put in the optics. See, all I want to do is capture the optics of those trees. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Thank you. And it's nice to have someone talk to me. Mom is so much into the painting over there, she forgets to talk to me.
I've got a delayed response.
Yeah, okay.
I've got 15 seconds to get something in.
So I'll come over here and put in a little bit more verticals here with that brush. I love the fusions where they just drag the surface. But there's all kinds of stuff, you know. I mean, Knight uses the big scraper, and I do too. But I'll look for the verticals and the horizontals in it. And remember, Clyde Aspervig, he does some trees with just big horizontals. I may come back in here with some of my mountain color and take a little bit of those out every once in a while. So I loosen up that ground and that light in there, get rid of that blue light in there.
So the lesson of this exercise, the goal of this painting is different than the hair, because the hair, you said you started front and worked back.
Yeah, exactly.
And
this is
one
different.
Going back, going forward.
This is why I paint landscapes and I paint wildlife and I paint everything, because it causes you, sometimes you're working front to back, sometimes back to front. The whole thing is a plan. You got to get this whole plan in your mind. Mm-hmm. And then you start it. Does that make sense? Now, if I'm going to bring light in from the right side here of my painting, I'll bring light in from the right side of my painting. I would put the light struck area here on the hill here, and then I'll let that light, this come to shadow over there. So this would be the light struck part of my mountain here, and then it'll go to shadow on this side. So I start looking also for my lights and shadows of where the light and shadow is going to be on the painting, which means I'm changing this one back here just a bit, and I might have a little bit more of a light strike, and I can do that very simple. I try to do it with as simple a strike as possible, sometimes leaving that granulated edge over there, and I'll put a little bit more light, but I want to get a little bit more atmospheric as well, right? Because I want to get some depth back here into this painting. So I'll look for the light, we'll put those in, look for a few little light touches as it gets back up into here. We'll stop some of that swirl, but I love the granulation of it. This is what I've been practicing to do, is getting that granulation that sets that depth roll back there. And then as I come forward here, you know, I'm going to get more yellow, more warms. This is usually where, you know, when I started to do, and you would die if I did this, but it is fun. Okay, don't die on me right now, anybody. But this is what I do now. This is like if I'm going to come into something, I would go just close. I'm just going to get close. I got to get myself some more yellow oxide here. And these are things that I'm working on. And guess what? In the landscape class, we're going to do this. I'm going to walk you through a big, huge textured painting here this year on a big one. We're going to take a color like this, model it up. Don't overmix it too much. Model that up. Find that tone that's going to come real close. So how I would paint something like that now is I'd look at that big power stroke that's coming right in there. I would get very, very brave, and I do just like what a Ken Knight would do, is I'd strike it like that. And look what that does to the painting. There, like that. And then what's the rule? Dark paints out light, right? And this is what I do on the rabbit, what I do on other things. I'm going to take some of my darks. You can do it while it's wet if you use a lot of paint, but I like to let it tack up a bit, but we don't have that time tonight. But I'll then come back and start to push through some of this color. You know, like when I come up through here, up into this area that's right in through here, you know, I might get it even a little darker, and I'll start to look for, and this is what the artist looks for. You look for like little angles of dark, little edges, little verticals. You look for angles, verticals, and horizontals into the painting. And so I see a few slight angled ones right in here. That'll come in right there. And I see a few right in here. And Ken Knight would just bust this right out with this light and dark. And you paint back and forth. So I might take some of my blue and these yellows and this kind of stuff and drag that right back up over that edge and soften that edge. I'm a representational artist. I'm creating the effect without copying it. Does that make sense? And what I'm trying to do here is find a way here to paint some of this back here. And I start heading back now, getting closer back to my tree line, to my trees. I'll set some of that in. And I'm starting to paint the depth of field that you see in there, but grabbing some of that interest. And it takes a lot of bravery, because what's one of the things, this is like the rabbit. You want to paint the rabbit, you got to get brave and be able to do that into the front of your painting. Be able to grab that paint, set that brush down flat and do that. But when you do that, like there, look at the depth that it's adding to the painting. It's adding a lot of depth as the room goes silent. Here, we'll paint some of these up and down with the verticals. You start to look for the power of the color, the movement of the color here. But it just adds so much to your painting. Let's take some of this.
So Pat was asking, recognizing that you follow a lot of artists, look at their styles, study their styles. Do you find, has it been a confusing journey for you? Or?
Sometimes it is. But you got to look at, if it's confusing for me, that's something I need to study.
So you can grow. So you can grow,
exactly. If it's confusing for me, hey, I look to artists that are selling, where they're selling and why. It's like in these little wildlife, and I go study Carl Ringus. Well, everybody who paints wildlife study Carl Ringus. because Carl Ringus is the father of wildlife painting. But what made him that way? It was his alla prima strokes and things that he did. That's what made him that way. And I want to know why. I want to know why those things made him that way. What was it that he saw? What is it that he sees? What he saw, and into those paintings and stuff. Now, this stroke that I did, I'm just getting rid of some of the dark that's on there. But let's say I wanted to create a little path here, a little pathway. I would make it more atmospheric from my yellows, and I would just go side to side back like that, and I can create a little visual journey up the little valley there, or something up like this way here. But I've got to make it more atmospheric. I've got to tone my color back more like my sky. I just physically add the sky in there, and I take it back to that, fading it out, getting rid of the edges back there, creating that little plane that goes back like that, and I start to create that journey. Because every good landscape or something like that should have a journey, right? Yes, Dave?
Yes.
And so I start to do that, but I want to capture some verticals in here, some strong, I'm still using my big brush. I'm painting this with a number 10. So we would add some smaller strokes and colors and other things going on here. This is just a capturing the real quick movement or the real quick idea of the landscape. Does that make sense, guys?
Yes.
Okay? So, and as I come up here, this is where you get even more brave. This is where you get more texture, more paint. And when I do something like this, I'm doing it 4 or 5 times throughout the painting as I come up through here like this, and I start to capture more of the front of the painting. I want to put in some horizontals and some verticals here. I work them back and forth and put some of that stuff in. I want to get some strong darks. You do eat up a little bit of paint. A little. Yeah. But it's so fun to do a quick study like this. It's just amazing fun. Get some darks into here too. I look at my darks have got to be really dark up here. And boy, you really want to see something. I mean, in the Western class, I go in there and attack the whole front of the painting with these darks, and then build lights and lights and lights. And then I go back and paint the darks to adjust the final thing, because darks paint out lights. I work all different kinds of things, but I'll work these darks that are all up in here. And when you're talking about the front of your painting here, the concept of the front of your painting, you're going to do this many times, back and forth, putting in what you would do plein air is something like this to capture some of that, maybe some, lights, some vertical lights and stuff. And I'd start to, once I put in the horizontal darks, I'll start my vertical lights and set some of these colors in, and I work them many times here. And I'll set this many times, back and forth, and then what I do is I start big. What did I say before? I start big, and then I work small. So I put in the big planes of color, so your color's getting brighter, your color's getting more texture, your color's getting more things happening up and through here. You see more of these greens up in here than you do back there. But it's going to take some time to put in all the little things. What I do is, I take some of my colors here and put out just a little bit more here, and I will as I come forward, and after this dries up a bit, then I start to work more detail into the front. I take smaller brushes, smaller yellows, more mottled greens and stuff, and I come in here and I start to work smaller little bushes and stuff like that, slowly painting out some of the dark. I paint big and then paint out. That's what we do. That's what all of them do. They push around and they do that with their color. You capture the feeling of it, the movement of it, and then you start to paint the detail of it. But you don't go paint detail out in the back. Does that make sense? So I may come up in here like this with this. There's still a big, big, strong. So I captured some of it. There's big, strong, a little bit more in here. I would work some more vertical strokes of light yellow, green in through here. Does that make sense? more vertical strokes, a lot more of this type of stuff to kind of start breaking up some of that color in there and start adding more movement here. Some artists, some of the Western painters will do it with a granulated stroke. They will just come in here like this and just put in the granulated strokes of the light. It gives you a different look, but they capture it quickly and effectively. The big thing is don't play around with it. So they may just do it with a bunch of granulated strokes like that to capture some of that field or movement of the greens and of the grasses and stuff like that. Yeah, Jay?
So Yvonne asks if you would let this dry and then add the pack horses since there's so much detail.
Yep, I usually do.
And she says, please finish this, even if you can't get it tonight, and show it to them.
Okay, now let me show you something here, though. Let me show you where it gets pretty, because we're here value-wise. We're just putting in, all I'm really doing here is a lot of the movement. I have not set in the main parts of my value strokes and intensity strokes that really are going to drive the interest and the depth. See that stroke that's right in there? See the interest and the depth that just created. And then I'm going to take that particular tone. I'm going to travel it. Remember what we said about finding a tone and traveling it. This is part of the thing that I do and part of my statements is I travel it. I'm going to take that. I'm going to gray that down a little bit here, atmosphere it up just a little bit here into that, and I'm going to travel some of that tone further back so it goes through my painting. I'll put some of that up into the mountains and stuff like that. So that tone's going to appear back up through here. So you're going to do that, but see that slight angled stroke as opposed contrasting the horizontal stroke and some of my verticals. That's what the artist has got to be, that's what you've got to be doing and looking at the contrast. Just like on the rabbit, I bend all that hair, his fur and stuff in different angles. So I'll be coming in here and breaking this up like this. This is what takes the most time up into the front of the painting. And it gets easier. I find it's really easy to do that. See, as this is tacking up, look at the interest this is starting to drive. Does that make sense? Now remember, you're a representational artist. Don't go in there and try to paint too much detail. So if you come back in here now and you see a little bit more of a yellow tone to that stripe there. Well, go grab it. Grab that little bit of that toned yellow, grab a smaller brush or turn your brush at the angle and see if you can hit that strike to add that interest back there. Does that make sense? And there goes that particular granulated stroke in there to add that in there. But one of the things before I get too far into this, and you can see it starting to happen. We're just, it starts to happen. But one of the things before I get too far is I go back, because one of the biggest controlling things I'm going to put out a little more white here so I can thrill and amaze. It's hard to thrill and amaze if you don't have enough white. But I've got to, I love the pushing power of a cloud. So I'm going to go back up to a little bit of my violet in this. And many times I do this with my larger brush, but I'm going to do it with my 10 here on this. But I go back and I push some clouds. I love to push clouds into the painting. I love the broken edges right up here, because that's when I see that and I get that, it's just like, wow, I got Anton there. I call it an Anton mountain. That's what I'm looking for in my painting. And I do that just really quick. But, usually we play around with it till it disappears. But I'm going to restate my light back up in here. And we paint that right back up into our mountain, into our cloud, into our sky here. This sets the lightness of my horizon line back up in here. And this is where I come back and I use my dirty finger, and some of my clouds just hit with some green and some yellow from my dirty brush. And I come back up and I'll work my sky again. I'll work this cloud right up here like this. And so I used to paint clouds, just a lot of stuff, and I still do, but now I'll do some really simplistic like this, and I'll look at the edges. And if I like the edges, and they don't distract too much from the front of my painting, I leave them. If I think they distract too much from my painting, I take a little bit of water into my brush and I just hit them like this and take just a little bit of that texture edge away in the directions I want that cloud. But I usually do verticals and horizontals, and I'll take a little bit away. Maybe I want to build this one a little bit more right in here. I do it very simplistic, very easy, and just try to capture some of the movement there. But before I get too wrapped up in stuff, I like to go back and set the clouds. I like this little, I can see right here, see when I look at that, almost like a little streak of violet right there. Can you, to me, and I see that as like a brush stroke of violet pulling right across there like that. And I was like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. I want to see if I can do that. Hit that in there. I start to look as to what you do when you plan like this is you start to look at how can I capture this image with strokes, with this, I don't want to go in there and just model up a whole bunch of, the sky and paint the sky and paint the sky. I try, what's our goal? We try to paint it as simplistic as possible. So I try to capture the angle of that hill and put that violet stroke right around to hit that area. And if I don't hit it enough, then I'll put some of the brown hill right back up in front of it. But I want to try to get that stroke and let some of it granulate out and see if I can get some of that violet in there. Does that make sense? And you're planning it and looking at it. I'm going to go a little bit lighter and see if I can get that with some interest right in there and leave that. Got a little bit on the hill. I'll just drag that off a bit. And see the interest that drag, great. It makes it look like little clouds in the back, see? If you don't play with it too much. Let's put just a bit of that in here. And let what happens, happens. And sometimes you'll see the painters, I like what Anton does with some of his hills as he really paints, and I do it too now, is I'll put a very strong light of a cloud right back behind a hill that really pushes it. And I like that. And so I've seen on several of these paintings where he hits into the mountain, he just leaves it. It almost looks like a little bit of snow. It's actually sometimes worse if you try to fix it. But you can take any type of color, any type of green or brown or light value, and just paint it out a little bit and just drag some of that around, and that'll give a different look to it. And all of a sudden, see, by adding that movement into your sky now, look at how it's changed everything in your landscape. Brief 15-second pause. I'm waiting for the applause.
What if I liked it before you did that?
Or you want to go blue? You want more blue back in there, back into or before the light that's back in there? You can, but here's a question, Marv. Are you painting what you like, or are you painting a look and a technique and drawing yourself?
So one of the things I want to clarify, because something you said, you and I have had this conversation, that you study people, and currently you're studying Westerns that are artists who are selling, and you want to know why. Exactly. But I think that there's a bigger piece of you that I see when I see you study. Yeah. You see techniques that are intriguing to you and that you study them. So not all of the artists that you sell or you've monitored or watched or looked at are even alive today. You've done a lot of studying of the Dutch to see, because you liked the way that they got the look of different fruits and niches and stuff. So one of the things that came up is that Karen Marshall and Pat, I don't know if we should let these two be together because they ask all these questions, is David's goal for us to become representational painters in all genre, landscape, floral, western, still life, or in other words, will we become more impressionistic in all things we paint? And
what is the goal of all of that?
I think, but I get that you're just showing people here's another way to paint.
And one of my favorite subjects is rose mauling and roses, painting roses.
And rose mauling's got very strict rules.
Did for years, because that's all they knew. And this is why I say, this is why rose mauling is really dying right now, because it's not growing. It's not and throughout its whole history, it grows. and except now it's not. And so, the thing is can you, as the as the painter and stuff, create new life and energy into that style, into that genre, into that look? Can you create new ways of doing things, new looks? That's what I look for.
Okay, new looks.
But that's what the Rosemahlers of old did. So they went out and they studied those and went and looked for those.
So is that the goal that you're thinking about when you share these different techniques, is to encourage people to
more than
try
anything
something
else
different?
And something else. I'm trying to teach you to see. And here's the thing, and it's like what we say earlier with Karen. We have certain likes and dislikes, and in some of us that's very strong, your likes and dislikes. And those likes and dislikes will keep you from seeing something and seeing it correct way, because you only see what you like, or you'll perceive it with a painting style that you've done before that you like, or that you find that's easiest to do. And that will keep you from growing. Does that make sense? And so, I try to, I'll go grab something, and, I'm not particularly fond of rabbits, but I sure did enjoy the challenge of painting it. Mm-hmm. The challenge of creating it, the challenge of creating the optics of it.
Trying a different optic approach.
Exactly. So do I want to turn you into, do I want to turn you into all landscape painters, flower painters, or anything? No, I want to turn you into an artist, okay? My goal is to turn you into an artist. And to be an artist, you have to be able to look at that light struck plane and that shadow plane and see the tone of it, and see now the brush stroke or the movement of how you would try to capture that element, that particular passage of color, with one stroke, two strokes, wide stroke, scraper brush. What are you going to use to capture that element? And that's going to teach you to see. And if you can see, you can paint anything. That's the big thing. And it's going to change the way you paint roses, if it's what you like to paint roses. It's what I've been saying, for the last couple of years. My roses have gotten better and better and better because I've stepped in and painted oceans, and I've painted landscapes, and I've painted wildlife, and I've painted horses, because I'm looking at different planes. And now I go back and I look at the rose and I say, wow, I never saw a rose like that before. Mm-hmm. But I see granulated strokes into the light edge of a plane of a red rose. Mm-hmm. Now, how can I capture that granulated stroke, that light edge? Before when you look at a landscape and you say, okay, well, light's coming here from the left, wouldn't you think that it would be just a tiny touch lighter up onto that edge there, pulling back that way, and it helps you direct that light just a little bit more. Maybe there's a little bit more of a light edge there. And now I'm watching my painting of the light a little bit more, and I'm learning that through this particular landscape. See, I love the power of that stroke that's right there. And can I leave it with how much texture I'm going to be developing and building up here? And it's just all part of it. And so you're learning that through a landscape. Now you'll go back. You'll look at something you really like to paint as a rose or something like that, and you'll look at it completely different. This is why, and many years ago, 20 years ago, I started with my dream of starting what we called the Academy of Decorative Painting. And the academies, and I started when Facebook started up, I started a Facebook page of it. I created a whole website called the Academies of Decorative Painting. And what that was is you're representing the Royal Academies of both England and Paris. And I went and studied the art, in the archives, and studied some of the artists that I really want, like Galland. Galland was, the master of the academies, and he taught Paul Baudry, who knew everything about these guys, can paint a strawberry, paint a rose. Paul Baudry created the centifolia rose that became the toll rose, but he also painted the ceiling in Palace Iglesias, which is the Paris Opera, which is absolutely amazing, with angels and all kinds of stuff, putty everywhere. And they could paint anything. And when when an artist entered the academy, it was like a gigantic university. It was 8 years. 8 years of solid study to produce an artist that can do it all. But to do it all, and to do it all really great, they had to study it all and learn how to see it all. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? And it was always been my goal to like say, okay, I want to have like these academies, and you come in here, and yeah, you're going to paint landscapes, and you're going to paint still lifes, and you're going to learn some of the Dutch techniques and learn all these techniques and everything like that, because then you're going to go out and you're going to find your look and paint your way and create your career. But it's the solid foundation of the learning of the academies. That has always been a dream of mine, to recreate that academic part of the painting and stuff, you know, and looking through it through the pure academics of it, you know. So here you start to capture some of the look, and you know, we're just beginning to capture some of the look. There's a lot of things I do. I'd move over to smaller brushes and work smaller things and smaller elements, and you might have to set an element 1 or 2 times. You might break up your stuff. Then you're going to start some of your trees in here more. You might come in here and, you know, grab more you know, yellows and stuff, and you know, highlights that come up in here, I may restate 5 or 6 times, especially the textured ones, until I start to get the look that I want. Sometimes I'll grab that and just drag it, granulate it back and through, and that just adds, every time you granulate it, adds little bits, like some of you are going to see a little angle there or whatever, you know. And let's say for instance that I wanted to paint, you know, you would study reflections of like lakes. Let's say we want to put a lake back in there. You know, the first thing about a lake, it's really easy. The lake is the sky. That's the main rule. Water is the sky. What's the color of water, Dee? She should be answering right about now.
Never gonna let her forget that.
Never gonna let her forget that. She wrote me and asked me one day, what's the color of water? It's the sky. But let's just say, oh, I want to put a lake in here. And I'm going to change it up, and I'm going to add a little lake. I'm going to add water to a lake in there, okay? So I'm going to put this lake in here. And let's say I want to make a little angled shoreline. Well, I'm in the shadow part of it over there, so I got to add violet to this, so I can add this angled shoreline. Now, this is way off the picture, but...
Sorry, D just is all caps, stop.
But let's... I love it. And so I'll add this back, and I'll add that shoreline right in there. This is just all stuff I know about how to paint a lake. So I'm going to get the impression of this lake. Now I know with a lake, with water, one of the things it's going to do is going to cast a reflection. So if I have trees or mountains and stuff, I don't have to have the same color. I just have to have some color of it. And I'm going to pull some of that down horizontal this way. That's going to create the reflections of into the water here, like that. And I'll reset. This is just how you paint water. I can, once I establish, this is how an artist changes it. This is how, you know, Clyde Aspervig knows how to change this stuff, because he's painted it in so many other things. So you can come back here and you can start to add like the little idea of a lake that's going to go in here, and maybe you want to have a little lighter shoreline right up in through here and break up that edge a bit and stuff like that. But all of a sudden, inside of this thing, you start to set a lake. Does that make sense? And I know what the lake is going to reflect that sky. And I can come back in and say other little interesting things, like I can reflect a cloud, or I can reflect the colors of a mountain or something like that. I can granulate. You know, I can pull more interest to it by granulating a highlight right into there like that, and create a shimmer onto the lake. This is all going to be artist stuff that I can control and I can do. So I can put the shimmer onto the lake, which draws more interest to the lake, which is something I wouldn't do if I'm going to be painting horses in there. Does that make sense? But these are all terms. So now all of a sudden I can paint a lake, and I know if I'm going into, you know, really deep shadows, I'd have a real deep shadow. This over here, this lake, it will really become dark back up over on this side if it was really heading into the shadows. Here, these are all things that I know because I study light, study color, and I study light. I know how it's gonna work within a thing. And all of a sudden I've taken this light spot that's right here into the painting here and added it into a lake. See? into there, and you can do anything in there. You can make it. If I don't add horses in here, I can put in, a little bit of a stream or something that goes right back down in towards that lake. This lake pulls your eye in. Maybe I'd look at refining my journey. There's a lot of different things that you can do, and I might pull from. But I would spend this, as you would head this would be like a quick plein air catch of it, and then you would go in and you would start working the studio part of the painting, which is going to be very small little applications of stuff, trying to get different edges, different colors, different things, and when I'm painting like this and I'm moving stuff like this, like I'll put on, especially as I come forward here, I'll put on big lights like this right up to the front. And then what I do is I come back in with darks and darker and ground and stuff like that, and I paint in the horizontals, which calms them down and pushes them down and sets in some of your ground. So I'll go back and forth like this several times, creating the verticals and the horizontals. When you're going to create the grass here, that just creates the undulation of the grass. And it's like you said, Jessica, when the first thing you read in when you looked at the elk that are up in the front, you said, I saw the photo of that and I got to go in there and take a look at that grass that's in there.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's about 12 times.
Well, it's the way that you have the snow and the grass weaving together. It just feels very naturalistic. That's the way it would look.
It took me 12 applications of doing this, light and shadow, and then, creating snow. Violet snow, like if I wanted to have snow, I'd come back in here and create snow. Here comes in snow like this, and then that snow gets painted out with some verticals of light color and some horizontals of dark color that helps set that snow into place, back and forth several times, developing it, especially up into the front of your painting. So you could say you like a painting like this and you put this all in. Yeah, you could put this painting can support elements of snow really well. What happens to your snow as it goes back into the backpack here is it's got to become more atmospheric. Does that make sense? It's got to become a little lighter and atmospheric. But you could hit the side of the hill there with a little bit of snow. Add some of that. Your warm snow. Then you go more violet. We know snow goes to the violets side over on the other side. So there's a lot of things that you may use something like this as a suggestion, and then you start painting more things into it. Or I can adjust it. I could take that back out and it's my painting. Does that make sense? And I can do, but I'm drawing as I'm using the original impression of this landscape, trying to capture a few other areas, elements in it that I like, and then changing it up. Now, these are joined too much together like in here. So I start, after I paint the big, I start going back and looking at the smaller things. So there's things that I would go in and change slightly. Like I'll take some of these colors right in through here and I'll break this up, maybe add another elemental unit right in here, break that up a bit, back and forth. I'll start to look how to break up some of the pointed nature of my painting right in here and break that up a bit, maybe blur that into the sky. So you see how it doesn't have that pointed look there anymore, right? And I'll look to that to look for the atmospheric parts of it and soften some of that pointy nature of it back or something like that. Or if you wanted more depth into the painting here, draw something back, head even more atmospheric, take some of these colors even more atmospheric here, a little bit more to the Purple Mountains Majesty, and you can set something a little bit further back here. Let me thin that out just a bit so it looks like I know what I'm doing. It's part of it too. Is set something back in through here, letting the sky and stuff come in just a little bit more, but set something back, further back. But you must always, always paint for Martha. That's the rule.
It's the rule. It's how we survive.
That's the rule. When she says, I don't like something, you go fix it. That's what you do. She controls the painting. but I go a little bit more to the violets and stuff back here and set something like that further back into it, back behind. You can set another mountain back to there and see how that changed the whole feeling of the whole painting there by setting that back. And I can put, if I wanted to soften it back just a little bit more, I'd go a little closer to my sky cloud right in there and push that right in there like that. And I'd look at how much I want to soften that back, that little point that's right there. I look at that and I set that little hill further back. Now the whole feeling of the landscape changed again. Just by the addition of that other little bump. I'm trying to get rid of the bump. It's a little too even through there. And changing that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And, you know, do you do it? Do you don't do it? That's your choice. But my whole thing is I'm going to do something completely different. You know, if I'm not going to add the horses and stuff like that, then I might want to restate my, you know, work on my journey through the painting a little bit more. Put a little bit more of my journey into the painting with some of my lights. So this journey pulls out more. So it pulls your eye further into the back of the painting, and you're coming right there from the water right back up, and now you're going further back in the painting. Does that make sense? And you get up close and it looks terrible, but you step back. You step back and you look at it, and the painting starts to take on some depth and some interest. You got a lot of stuff to do up in here, a lot of working, and some verticals and, you know, verticals, shadows and stuff to add, you know, into your trees up here, vertical shadows and stuff like that. I would be putting some of those in, some lights, you know, you put in some other things. But there's lots of stuff, and you can look at, you know, other landscapes and stuff like that I've done to get some ideas and stuff, but put in some vertical lights and stuff as you start some of your trees. But it's all colors.
Cindy says it's prettier than the photo.
That's the goal. That's the goal. Well, see, the photo is not a painting. Our job is to make a painting. Does that make sense? Our job is to capture some of these elements and put them in here. I love the visual journey. I always love in my landscapes when I put a visual journey here. Maybe a fisherman, a little boat, put a deer, or, you know, something like this would support an elk really well. But I love the journeys. I love the visual journeys of it. And set it on your easel and step back and look. And do you want to have, you know, if it were me, I would put just a little more light back in here, but Martha didn't like that, so I'm not going to go near it right now.
Well, but it's changed now. You remember, it's changed from what you were doing.
But see, one of the things I like, and Dobrinsky, those of you, you know, remember in the landscape class, Dobrinsky liked doing that as well. That's one of his things that I noticed about his paintings, is that he comes back and restates that light, that nice light back here several times back into that, along that horizon line, because that gives you the ultimate of depth into your painting, see? Mm-hmm. And so the artist will come back. You don't just do it once, you do it several times, and we might model that up to a couple of visual layers there like that. And all of a sudden you have little clouds, little sparks of clouds, and a little bit more stuff going on. Be careful, because Martha won't like it. And, you know, but it gives a little bit more. But you know how to do it. That's the thing. Do you always do it? No. But you know how to do it to get that visual depth back there. And, you know, it is there on those mountains and stuff there. It's just up close, and we want to push it further back. And all of a sudden you have something that is doable, workable, and you can define it up a little bit more. Does that make sense?
Yep. Betsy says very pretty.
Who
Margot
said that?
loves it. Betsy.
Okay. Betsy, you're awesome. Yes. How many think it's awesome? Please clap. But you can do it real quick, you see. And this is the thing is, you know, so, I mean, on this particular painting, I grabbed some Ken Knight. I did some Anton. Right. I did a little bit of Clyde, you know, Aspervig and their particular techniques. Would I do more? I mean, I would come in here now. I'm braver. I would attack this whole area again. I'm starting to like that, but there's a lot more I would attack. Does that make sense?
Karen Marshall's clapping. Mary Govert loves it. Tom Hayes is beautiful. Pat Duhan says it's beautiful. And she says you're a wonderful teacher. She learned so much.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah.
Oh, if you added a deer at the water, what size would he be from Judy? Clap, clap, clap. That's a good question.
Here, I'll add my detail brush. There you go. There's your deer. See him? I mean,
at the water. If he was over there at the lake.
Yeah, he's over there just. Well, that's what you're going to control. What's going to control that is how big your brush is up here. How big is your grass up here? How much depth you got to have here to here. And you got to remember, if this is your vanishing point, if I'm going to sit in landscapes, if I'm going to make this as my vanishing point, I'm going to set my first height here, and then that is going to, that angle coming back here like this, coming together to your vanishing point. That's going to suggest the height of anything that you're going to put in there.
You know, that looks kind of like a deer right now.
Well, it does. It'll look even more like a deer if I put another one in the shadow or something.
Or like a couple of them scattered, kind of like.
Yeah, exactly. So, but you know, if you're looking at this right here, it's just like in real life. If I come in here and tap a few things in here, you know, is it deer or is it cow or what is it? But whatever it is, they're drinking.
They're thirsty.
Does that make sense?
So I was wondering if the horses would be too much for this one now because it has so much interest throughout.
Well, that's the whole thing is because part of the goal that I said in here is I'm not going to put the horses in here right now.
Yeah.
So if I go in here and start to put these horses in, then I might have to soften my granulated edges all back through here and go more to a power stroke and get rid of some of that stuff, a soft thing of color. But the question is, you know, can you get something in here? But that's going to compete against him. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That right there is going to compete against, this right here is going to compete against that because he's small and he has more detail. It wouldn't compete against a big horseman, but this size, that would compete. So what would you do? Take away some of the edges. Take some of your darker green, dark paints out light, take away and soften down until your eye comes to here first. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. So, okay. So these are kind of fun to do a setup like this, to set up and say, and they're kind of fun to look at. That's the other thing is, now when you sit back, and whenever I sit back and look and really enjoy the painting here, but by having my planes, and especially and the granulation and stuff that I have in here, that like this part of the painting, that back part of the painting right there, looks pretty darn good. And I didn't go in there and paint trees or anything like that, but you see trees in there. You see trees. And you really see trees if I put a bigger tree up here, or I did some more stuff and brought those all farther forward. And if I painted a big old cow here, you'd see those as cows. You know, we control that. But that looks, you know, from here back, that looks pretty good. You know, right back in here, that looks pretty good for the depth and everything that I have into the painting here. But look back into here. Now that I've hit that several times, look at how many colors you're actually seeing inside of that. And see the granulated strokes and the colors that are in there. Does that make sense? It keeps focusing out. And the angles and the strokes. And it's all a little different. And that is not easy to do. You have to practice that stuff, and you have to hold these guys really flat and drag them, and then look at the effect and maybe use the corner and change it a bit, and you know, dab and paddle around a little bit, find something that makes the edges and stuff. And boy, I tell you, I love this thing. This is what the side I used today. This is the side I used the day before yesterday. And I got to clean that off. But I love to pull that on, just plow it on, and then go in and paint it, because that's caused me to get a little braver with my coloring and stuff. Which caused me to paint the rabbit more like I wanted to do, because I got used to seeing a lot of real texture in that center of interest. Does that make sense?
I got there stepwise. Karen Marshall says, how do you control a desire to keep changing things over and over in a painting and finally force yourself to put down the brush? Now, before you answer it, Deanne answered this. Intervention.
You got to have an intervention. Yeah. Maybe we should start an artist club of interventions. An artist club of, just call it interventions. Yeah, of that. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's no, what a lot of that, what it is, well, it's part of your goal. And, think about it a lot of times, when you watch one of my DVDs or one of my lessons, I say, I'm going to try to do this in 90 minutes, or I'm going to try to do this in an hour. I set a limit for myself. And part of that, where I got away from that, is I do entire series of what I call 30-minute compositions. I try to do I call them quick compositions, quick paintings. I try to do the entire painting in under 30 minutes. That keeps me from painting, moving forward, and I got to go. It's got to get done. And those are the prettiest paintings you're ever going to do, because you leave a lot of areas, and that leaves a lot. I mean, you don't have time. You gotta keep, you gotta keep moving. You gotta keep going. You gotta keep that whole thing going.
Jess, that's what you and Deanne were doing at the art center.
Last fall. Yeah, challenges.
The 20-minute challenge.
Yeah.
And we'll be doing those again. Mm-hmm. We'll be doing those again in our next event, right?
Yeah. And that's the size of it. But you look at it from back here now, and you say, "Wow, that's but you don't see up close. You don't see all the depth. And now you're seeing the atmosphere of it. But it's got to have a lot more up in here. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. But you see it quite a bit different here, and you set it up on something like that, and you start to see a little bit more of the atmosphere and the depth of it, and all that kind of good stuff. And that's what you got to do your final strokes and determine your visual range that you got to do. So one of the things that I'm going to be, when we're going to be doing with the color, is that we're going to be looking at, okay, we're going to take a power stroke of this. Now, what tone do we need to suppress it or to adjust it to fit inside of something? That's what I call applied color theory. It's not just study value, study this. Once we get this language out of the way, especially towards the summer and stuff this summer, we're going to be doing some really neat stuff by adjusting some of those colors and tones and what it is, and be able to talk to each other and say, this is, well, if you have this value here and you want to create this contrast, maybe you need to have if you have a 6, maybe you need to drop down to an 8 here, or drop down to a 4 and cool it slightly and do this and make that stroke, and let's make that mark, that passage, and then see what happens visually. What happens? That's where it gets really funny. You sit back and you look at it, and most of the painting is painted by the look and the plan, and then you make the stroke and you get back. Mm-hmm. And it's a great way to paint. It's a great way to look at things. And boy, was this one heck of a long class already.
No, it was so interesting. And
it is interesting, and it is fun. And I know I just want to take a few minutes, and some people were asking me about how to go about selling paintings, and I just want to discuss it just for a few minutes, because we'll discuss it even more and more. But I want to give just 5 minutes here. Okay.
And then we'll have more live sessions.
We're going to have more live sessions and do more, because I know everyone gets tired and everything. But I just want to give you a couple of things to think about here, and then we'll discuss some more. This went a little bit longer than I really intended it to go. But I love this stuff. I love this stuff, because this is what truly changed me as an artist and continues to change me even today. And I can guarantee you, in 3 months, because I'm studying now, in 3 months, I'm going to paint everything completely different again, because my brush I paint without habits. I try to paint without habits. That's where I want you to go as well with some of that. Let me show you something that's really interesting. And for those of you that, want to, let me go over to this one here. Let me switch over to the computer here for just a second. And one of the things I want you to do, okay, is when you do, and it's like here I typed up into Google. A lot of people say, something for you to think about. A lot of people would say, okay, where do you sell your art? And they would type into Google where to sell your art. And then you'll get all these websites that will show you, okay, online sales here, online sales there, and so on and so forth. So you got all these things. That's not what you type into Google if you want to sell in your area. Type in imagine yourself as a buyer, and one of the statements that they would use, where to buy art. Where would you buy art? And Google does some very fun things when they do it. So it's someone who's looking for a painting isn't going to say, is not going to type into Google, where do I sell art? They're going to type in, where do I buy art? And you'll get two completely different results. And I found when I was comparing the results of both that you don't get the websites that are out there advertising, we sell paintings. Now there are some, but I would do it from where to buy art. And the one thing about Google is if you create something on the internet that shows you local, you come up first. So here, when you type in where to buy art, we come up in Google on top here, Jansen Art Studio, because it brings up where you're typing in on your location and where you are. So one of the things that you have to have, no matter what it is that you're going to sell, you have to have an internet presence. You have to create it. Now, here, no reviews or anything. These are the other places around that are selling paintings. We have the art studio here. It shows where we are, but we don't have any reviews because we don't have any store hours. We don't allow anybody inside here. Yeah, we do it a little different. But if I go over here and click the Jansen Art Studio, what it is, it shows the Jansen Art Studio, shows the other studios all the way around, and it says right here, Jansen Art Studio has a website. You go to their website, it takes you right to the Jansen Art Studio and the Art Center, and then it'll go right over to our gallery, and you can start looking at some of our paintings and stuff like that inside the what's happening inside the gallery. But it immediately goes back to where you're going to have Google. So you have to have, really, if you want to start to sell stuff, you've got to start looking at, how are people going to find you? Now, Deanne knows about this too, and we should have some nice discussions about this because she got a gallery this year. And there is nothing that beats a brick and mortar place. That's one reason why we got the Sydney Fine Arts Center. But you can have other things too. I sell a lot of stuff to my students, but look at out here. Let's put in there where to where to find painting classes. Okay, something like that. Painting classes. You can put something like that into Google, and who comes up here too? Jansen Art Studio. And it says in here, their website mentions painting and classes. And so the Jansen Art Studio comes up here. We have a website presence. This happened to me the other day when I'm constantly checking this out. And this is another one in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Here, this painting with a twist. And it's like, look at everybody that's inside those classes. That's a lot of people. Someplace in Lancaster painting easy stuff there that I've never seen before. But the thing is, if someone's looking for painting classes, they're going to put into Google. And you want to make sure, if you're going to create a business, you want to make sure you come up on Google, because everyone uses Google. And so you want to create something, a website, stuff, and put your location in exactly where it is, whether you have a gallery or not. You want to have some type of internet presence that's going to be, that's going to help you create that. That's one reason why it's kind of nice to create a website, even if you're not going to sell it directly, but it gives you an internet presence, because everyone's going to type into the internet and say where that they can find it. Now you can have a brick and mortar, but your brick and mortar store, like we have the Sydney Fine Art. Now I can guarantee you, if I type in where to find art in Sydney, our Sydney Fine Arts Center is going to come up, because Google's going to grab everything in your local area and give them the highest priority. But then once you look at that, so let's go back here as the where to buy art. Type that back in here, okay? And so Jansen Art Studio comes up. But then don't go where to sell art. These are the sites that you want to look at. Start looking at the top ones down here, and there's, like here's a nice thing. 10 places to buy wall art, unique prints and wall art here. So this magazine here, House Beautiful, here, is telling people where they can buy wall art and all that kind of stuff in the 10 places that are here. So you start going down through here and looking at which ones represent artists and how can I go about art.com, how can I go about putting some of my art, inside the, this particular place here, or how to find it. But Google really helps you with this part of it. The other thing is, like one of the things that you have to have in today's market, you have to have an internet presence for yourself. That's the first thing is that you've got to establish. Then you can go out where to buy art in your area, and then find the top 10, or so websites that are there, and then submit them letters to say what does it take to get art in there represented. Some of them, charge a commission and so on and so forth. That's gonna get you better exposure. You got to find a way to get yourself your exposure. For us, we have a collector's list. It's taken a lot of years to produce that list, and we market to that particular list. And most of them come out from students and stuff that are looking at some point in time to buy a painting, and so we market to them. So teaching is a great way to find people to sell your paintings and stuff, and then putting in their classes. And maybe you put up their classes, someone comes up and talks to you about painting or learning to painting, and then sees something you like and buys it. And that starts your market. That starts generating your market. You've got to get seen. Now, one of the worst places to get seen, I find, is Facebook. I put up stuff in Facebook all the time, and Facebook does not work for me. We have put, we've been on Facebook about 6-7 years. I put thousands of dollars into advertising on Facebook, and it doesn't work. None of it works, because most of the people that go to Facebook are going for other things. And so they're not going to Facebook to buy art or learn or take classes or buy DVDs and all that kind of stuff. They go to, our website, they buy it from there, they go directly. They don't do it on Facebook. So don't build a Facebook page and think it's going to work, because honestly, it doesn't. It gets you some exposure. Some people might find you. It's free. So it's exposure. It's free exposure. But does it work? No. There's a lot of them out there that say it doesn't work. And I'm one of them that believes that I've put a lot of stuff into it. It doesn't work. But who's going to represent you more? You can put your paintings in all these selling things. They have artist sites. Put them up through here. That's all fine and great and good. None of them are going to market you. It's up to you to do the marketing. It's up to you to market that. Tame, if she's still around, if it's not past dinner time there now or something in Japan, it's in the afternoon. We did things that she did. She put her art in, went to her local tea shop, which is like a coffee shop, put in some of her art there. Hair salon, people are sitting in the hair salon, put your art in there. See if you can, talk to the hair salon director, put your art, hang it up in there. You get somebody, here's a card, you can give them a percentage of the sale or whatever it is if they take a sale for you. Look at the places that you normally go and see if you can get some art into those areas so you can get seen. The big thing is you got to get seen. You can be the best painter in the world, and if no one can find you, you can't sell your paintings. Yeah, Jay.
I think Tame also contacted a real estate agent.
Yep.
When they were.
She got all of her art beautiful. She got all of her art in a show, and contacted a real estate agent in there that was building a model home, and they decorated the entire model home with all of her paintings. Now, does that work? Well, the customer is going in there to buy a home, but if they see something, especially if you paint with like the rules of Hagen and some of the other ones, if they see something there that they are really attracted to, a story that hits them, like maybe it's a fisherman that reminds them fishing with their dad or something like that, or it's a giant elk next to a lake and all this stuff that just grabs them, then that might work, but it has to be something that grabs them. You can't just paint something and just throw it into the model home and expect it to sell, as much as we would want to, because they're going there for a different purpose. the big thing is type it into Google where to buy art, because those are the sites you look at, because they're going there to buy art. Yeah.
Pat Duhan mentions the doctor's office.
Yes.
And I know when they rebuilt the Lancaster County Cancer Institute, it's completely decorated with paintings by local artists. So
exactly.
Finding some of those other venues that are not gallery traditional, but are, you know, the movement for.
I was reading a young wildlife painter, and what he was saying in an article in the Artist magazine, and he was talking about how he's built up his market, and now his paintings sell $5,000-$7,000 for a painting, and he said, if you're a starting out painter, you need to go to this show. I never heard of it in my life, and it was a Western wildlife show for wildlife painters only, and they get, over the weekend, they get between 8,000 and 10,000 buyers of that genre that go through that show. I had never in my life heard of that show. It's about 10 hours drive south from us here, so then that started me out looking around the United States, and there are hundreds of artists selling shows everywhere around the United States in all the different genre fields. A lot of Westerns and stuff everywhere, the Western Art Association, all that kinds of stuff. But there's shows every month, everywhere around, and they'll give you the attendance numbers, 8,000, 10,000 in attendance, how much they sell, you can expect to sell and everything. But those type of there's nothing. There's no painting classes. There's nothing there. All of the attendees are going there to buy art or really look at art. And this is what this kid said this was what's built his entire collector's list, is this show, attending it every year. And now he is got this list of people who buy his paintings, like his paintings, and he's built it that way. The thing is, he said, you have to market yourself. And so as we go on, we'll talk more about this kind of stuff and this subject and everything. But you know, you've got to do it yourself, and don't look to social media. Don't look to. I mean, I put stuff out there, and that's great. And you know, I did a couple of tests on Facebook and spent money and did advertising in it, and got maybe 1 or 2 little sales off of it. But people on Facebook don't really do anything. I mean, they're there for social. They're there to look at what's happening, and they can be 1 second here and then off watching a video over here or doing something here or anything like that. They don't go on Facebook to shop. You need to go into markets where those customers are going there to shop. And it's really interesting. And there's other places like Amazon started their Amazon, an artist place on Amazon for selling art. We're all watching that to see what happens with that. But again, how are they going to find you on Amazon? It's up to you to market it. It's up to you to... Amazon's not going to market you. Amazon's not going to promote you and put you out everywhere unless you pay them money to do that. So it's up to you to get out there and get your art. And the easiest way to do it, start local. Put it out there, do like Tomei said, do like Deanne said, start with local arts and guilds and clubs and stuff like that, and see if you can get it in some restaurants and, like Pat said, a hospital, doctor's office, that kind of stuff. Get some of this stuff out there. And big thing is get yourself an internet presence. And so when you type in where to buy art in your area, your business comes up. Whether you have a gallery or not, your business comes up, and that will help you a little bit more, into the artist field. That's the big place. That's where you start. And Facebook isn't going to do it, because
nobody's going to do it. You have to make it.
You have to do it.
You have to market
it's
yourself.
All up
it's
to
not
you.
Gonna. Rarely does somebody come knocking on the door. It's that you have to go out and make yourself known.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Where do you, it's all up to you. Marketing is all up to you. And we'll talk about things, and that's one thing that we can look at Sydney, and when we're out there at Sydney too, we'll talk about what some of the looks, some of the things that they want. And the Sydney Fine Arts Center, we got it for a couple of reasons. Our son, our family and stuff's out there, but I got it because I want that gallery presence. And that's always been a dream of our family, is to have that. And that's really going to lift us up quite a bit, is that gallery presence, and see if you can get some of those representations. There's a lot of galleries out there, a lot of them. I was watching one over Christmas that was wonderful, and I watched it live happening. They did it on the 23rd of December. It was in Los Angeles, and they took out a whole bunch of artists. No paintings could be over $1,000, and they had like 35,000 visitors that day to the site, going in and buying and selling all of these paintings and stuff like that. And I watched that. It was an online. They did it only online. They had a gallery, but they produced an entire online event and had it one day only. All these paintings, here it all is here, and they just sold them like crazy. It's new and it's different, but they use their gallery to advertise the online part of the event. But how's people going to find it? You've got to say, okay, I'm going to put it out there. And unless you spend thousands of dollars advertising on Google, if I'm in Los Angeles, somebody in New York's not going to see it. But if I'm in Los Angeles, everyone in the Los Angeles area will see me on the local Google if I create a website address for that area. Anyway, there's a lot of ideas and a lot of things, and I know it's late.
I know.
It's real late. So now we have a 3.5-hour class that was supposed to be 2 hours. Sorry!
Some of these questions just might have to wait until next time about pricing.
So we could do that.
Yeah, like how do you start with pricing?
Pricing, yeah, I answered a lady there. Pricing too, we do it by the square inch. Basically, most artists do it by the square inch. Okay, if you really want to look at some of the different things, put in there pricing your paintings by the square inch into Google, and you'll find all kinds of artists out there and galleries that talk about the complexity of the design and how it's going to go somewhere between $3 and $10. You get up to the big brushes, then they're going $18, $20 a square inch. And all that kind of stuff, but they do it by the square inch, the field area, and the complexity of the design. The average in the United States right now, is this another statistic I love to find, is $3 a square inch. The upper height of that is about $6 to $7 a square inch for the painting. The average right now is $3. I thought that was interesting.
I don't mean to press you on anything, but Kipper is sitting behind you,
yes,
almost asleep, and standing up.
She's like, it's time to go to bed, Daddy.
That says thank you for this extra information. She's got work to do.
Yep.
Yeah, you betcha. How many actually lived through the event? It was this long time. On the West Coast, it's not bad for you guys. It's only 8:30. It's not bad for Margot. Margot out there tonight? I didn't hear you.
Yes, Margot's here.
Oh, yeah. Okay, Margot.
Oh, Margot's asking all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, okay. And how many bowls of ice cream did that take, Vivian?
Oh, Vivian's gone to bed.
Vivian went to bed? Yeah.
So lots of lovely comments and thank yous, and we want everybody to know how much we're happy that you guys were joining us. Thank you. Yes, David loves to teach. More importantly, he just loves to share what he's learned.
Yeah, exactly.
And thank you so much for being a part of it. Color is a passion of his, and we every time we do this, we'll just revisit topics that you need to discuss.
Exactly. Yeah, we revisit some of the topics and everything but there's just so much. There's just so much I want to share with you guys, because I was like, oh wow, I liked, and that's neat. I got to show everyone this and stuff, because it's the process of painting. It's the process of creating, and it can be learned. Even a left brain guy like me can learn it. We can do it. We got to, we can figure it out. We can paint a rabbit. Okay? And we're going to paint a fox and a cow, and we're going to look for those strokes. But hopefully tonight, when you looked at that photo, you saw some of those particular plane strokes, how to make that plane stroke and how you're going to get it. You start to see it, and now you got to grab it. Don't just grab a color and put it on there. Look, and you can start to see that plane and how to capture that plane.
Just really quick before you say goodnight, Nola Jones is in Victoria, Australia.
Oh, fantastic!
Us. And
fantastic. See, that would be early this morning there. For
3:30 in the afternoon.
Oh, 3:30 in the afternoon.
She still has time to go to the market and make dinner.
Yeah. Oh, very good. Thank you, Nola. Thanks for joining us.
And then our beloved friends. We just had so many wonderful people. People who are new. It's their first time coming. A lot of first timers. And
good.
A lot of first timers. So it was really, really great. Great questions from everybody. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that would
You
be
guys
good.
make
Sometimes
the-
we're gonna have to do this in the morning so I can go through, we can have lunch together, and then we can go for the whole day, like the whole day. Yes, I know, baby. I know it is time. Well.
Bedtime, Daddy, bedtime. Say goodnight to your
yes.
friends.
You do look tired. Yes. How am I going to capture that look, baby? Okay. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for a
Thank you,
wonderful
everyone.
evening. Thanks for
Good
sticking
night.
around with
Thank
me.
you, everybody.
Yes, I'm going to go rest my voice and so I can
Feed the puppy.
do that.
Go to
And
bed.
yes, and go take you outside too. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night, and I'll put some of these pictures, all that kind of stuff up, and you can try something like that. Or if you want to try it on another landscape, and just include your inspiration, and we can help you with some of the stuff. It'd be fun. It's just a fun little exercise. Okay. All right. We'll see you guys later. Everyone say good night.
Good night.
Good night. Good night, everybody. Bye bye.